Chapter 319. Lord Taoist Jinyang originally planned to organize Qinshi Soul Formation ceremony on a large scale like Lord Taoist Xianyin did last time, but Qinshi refused. In his opinion, since Xianqing School's reputation was flourishing day by day and Tiandao sect was declining day by day, it would be too domineering and disagreeable for them if they still held a big event like last time. It would be better to keep a low profile. After thinking about it, Lord Taoist Jinyang accepted. Xianqing School had never been a high-profile cultivation group, so it was better for them to be a bit more modest. After Emo Chenga heard what he said, she laughed inwardly. In the end, it was just that he found it troublesome and didn't want to socialize with others. However, this was for the best. At that time, she would have to go out and meet people, and she was also afraid of trouble. Upon learning that Emo Chenga had returned safely, her friends in the school all sent her greetings through summoning talismans. Among them, Luo Fengxue even paid her a visit. Emo Chenga hadn't returned for 10 years, but she heard a lot of gossip from Luo Fengxue. First of all, after Junior Marshal Brother Bai Yanfei married Senior Marshal Sister Wu, he discovered that although this Senior Marshal Sister Wu was gentle and honest, she had a stubborn temper and always tried to control him, which annoyed him endlessly. However, his master, Lord Taoist Jinyang, also protected Senior Marshal Sister Wu, leaving him helpless. Speaking of this matter, Luo Fengxue took pleasure in Junior Marshal Brother Bai's misfortune. She rudely mocked that Junior Marshal Brother Bai deserved it. As for Junior Marshal Sister Jiang, she had been living a good life for the past few decades. Her aptitude wasn't bad in the first place. After decades of dedicated cultivation, she actually rushed from the early stage of the foundation building realm to the late stage in one go. This kind of speed was rare in the entire celestial pole. If her cultivation went smoothly in the future, she might be able to form her gold core when she was about 150 years old. As for that Junior Marshal Brother Bai, he had yet to reach the peak of foundation establishment. Seeing that Junior Marshal Sister Jiang, whom he looked down upon, had caught up to him, he wondered if he regretted it. Regarding this matter, Luo Fengxue said, "In my opinion, it's fortunate that Junior Marshal Sister Jiang didn't marry him. Otherwise, she wouldn't have the achievements she has today. It's a pity that Senior Sister Wu has to take care of chores for him every day. She doesn't even have much time to cultivate." Sigh. Luo Fengxue was very popular among female disciples. Since Senior Marshal Sister Wu had a gentle temperament, presumably Luo Fengxue also had a good relationship with Senior Marshal Sister Wu. Putting this matter aside, his old friends were all doing well at the moment. During these 10 years, Senior Marshal Brother Guangzhu of Seoul's Retreat Peak had already formed his gold core. Roughly estimating, the first time Emo Chenga met him was almost 70 years ago. At that time he was already in the late stage of the foundation building realm. His cultivation had been very smooth, and it was only a matter of time before he formed his gold core. Yi Jingwen, on the other hand, was rather pitiful. He had tried once but failed to form his gold core. However, he was still young, only a little over 100 years old, so there was no need to be anxious. They hadn't seen each other for 10 years, so Luo Fengxue spoke for a long time before leaving. In the end, Luo Fengxue mischievously congratulated Emo Chenga. "Chenga, I still haven't congratulated you. How did dual cultivation feel?" Emo Chenga was embarrassed by her laughter, so she pretended to be angry and said, "I still haven't settled the accounts with you. What Senior Marshal Brother Qin? You also cheated me." Luo Fengxue burst into laughter. "You're the one who thinks that. At most, I just didn't clarify things. I didn't lie to you." "Yes. You clearly knew I was deceived, yet you still followed along and hid it from me." Emo Chenga grunted. All right. Luo Fengxue finished laughing and put her arm around Emo Chenga's shoulder. "When Marshal Uncle Shoujing brought you back, I knew the relationship between the two of you wasn't ordinary. But now that things have come to this, I still find it inconceivable. You're really a lucky guy." Emo Chenga also laughed. "Similarly, he's also a lucky guy." Luo Fengxue was stunned, but she soon burst into laughter and patted Emo Chenga's shoulder. "All right, since you want to move your immortal's cave, I won't give you any more trouble. I'll head back first. Remember to chat with me later when you have time." And Emo Chenga stood up and saw her out. After leaving her immortal's cave, Luo Fengxue flew into the air. When she looked down, she happened to see Emo Chenga welcoming Qinshi inside. She couldn't help but sigh. It seemed second Senior Marshal Sister was going to be sad. However, when she recalled Emo Chenga saying he's also a lucky guy, Luo Fengxue felt that this had nothing to do with aptitude or identity. Perhaps this was where second Senior Marshal Sister was inferior to Emo Chenga? Right after Luo Fengxue left, Qin Shi came and immediately asked her, "When are you moving?" Upon hearing his impatient tone, Mo Tiange smiled. "Why are you in such a hurry? It's not like I won't move." Qin Shi said bluntly, "I miss you." Although the two of them had long been intimate, Mo Tiange still blushed when she heard this. "All right, the steward's hall has taken care of the matter, so I can go now." Qin Shi was overjoyed. He took her hand and walked away. "Let's go then." "Hey," Mo Tiange said helplessly, "there's still something else." Qin Shi widened his eyes. "Didn't you say everything was taken care of? Why is there something else?" He looked suspicious. Obviously he thought this was just an excuse. Mo Tiange felt annoyed and amused at the same time. She said, "Why are you in such a hurry to go back? Those things will be taken care of by the steward's hall. It's not dark yet, so we can go see Master." At the mention of Lord Daoist Jinghe, Qin Shi's suspicious expression disappeared. He asked her, "What medicinal pills should we give to Master?" Mo Tiange thought for a moment, then said, 9 Revolution Spiritual Heart Pill, Extreme Pure Golden Pill, Tai Pulse Moistening Pill, all of these are fine. In addition, we'll also bring 2 flowerless golden fruits. Flowerless golden fruits wither soon after they're picked. Isn't this a bit hard to explain? Mo Tiange smiled. What's hard to explain? You're already a nascent soul cultivator. It shouldn't be a problem for you to preserve them for a year or so, right? Qin Shi thought for a moment, then nodded. You're right. If we surround the flowerless golden fruits with a large amount of spiritual aura and seal them with special talismans, they won't be preserved for a long time, but they'll be fine for a year or so. After that, the two of them entered the virtual sky world to prepare. There were 2 flowerless golden trees inside the virtual sky world. One of them was bearing fruit, which was useful for cultivators above the nascent soul realm. Mo Tiange was still in the core formation realm, and Qin Shi had just reached the nascent soul realm, so they hadn't picked it yet. These 2 flowerless golden trees were tens of thousands of years old. They were relatively long-lived spiritual trees that bore fruit once every 100 years, and only a few fruits would be born each time. They carefully picked them and put them in jade boxes. Qin Shi also used some methods to seal the spiritual aura. Soon after, the two of them left the virtual sky world and went to Shanqing Palace together. Lord Daoist Jinghe was still in the closed-door meditation room, and this time, Lord Daoist Jinyang was also present. Upon seeing them, Lord Daoist Jinyang smiled kindly. "Shoujing Qingwei, why are you here?" The soul formation ceremony hadn't been held yet, but just like Tiange, Qin Shi still called out, "Martial Uncle Jinyang." Okay, you don't have to be so polite." They were only halfway through their greetings when Lord Daoist Jinyang lifted them up. The happiest person about Qin Shi's soul formation was actually Lord Daoist Jinyang. Mo Tiange and Qin Shi stood up, then greeted Lord Daoist Jinghe. "Master." Lord Daoist Jinghe was in good spirits today, so he said with a smile, "Stand up. I've never seen the two of you so polite before. You're indeed different after getting married." Upon hearing his teasing, Mo Tiange felt relieved. Apparently Master's condition today wasn't bad. He even knew how to joke. Before they arrived, the 2 nascent soul Dao Lords were talking about something. After Mo Tiange and Qin Shi took their seats, Lord Daoist Jinyang was the first to ask, "Shoujing Qingwei, what brings you here?" Qin Shi answered, "We came to see Master's condition and ask if there's anything we can help with." "Oh, I see." Lord Daoist Jinyang nodded, feeling quite gratified. "You're very considerate. Your Master's injury won't threaten his life, so you don't have to worry about it." "Yes." Qin Shi looked at Lord Daoist Jinghe and asked, "Martial Uncle Jinyang, are there any medicinal pills that can treat Master's injury?" "There are several kinds of medicinal pills, but the spiritual plants they need are really hard to find. Alas, there are very few natural treasures in the world nowadays. Cultivators above the nascent soul realm can hardly take medicinal pills. In the past 10 years, we've only concocted a few healing medicinal pills." Upon hearing this, Mo Tiange and Qin Shi exchanged glances. Qin Shi took out 2 jade boxes from his Chengkuan bag and said to the two of them, "Master, Martial Uncle Jinyang, Tiange and I benefited from a disaster on Demonic Mountain this time. We obtained some treasures. Take a look and see if they're useful for Master's injury." The 2 Lord Daoists looked quite surprised. They knew Qin Shi's vision. The treasures, he said, must be precious. Lord Daoist Jinyang took the boxes and heard Qin Shi say, "Here are some medicinal pills. We obtained some spiritual plants, and the ones that weren't suitable to be preserved were refined into medicinal pills. Here are 3 flowerless golden fruits. Fortunately, I formed my nascent soul, Otherwise I wouldn't have been able to bring them back. Flowerless golden fruits. The two Lord Taoists were shocked and glanced at each other. Lord Taoist Jinyang put the box of medicinal pills aside. Seeing that the jade box was full of spiritual aura, he carefully peeled off the complicated talisman on it. After the box was opened, the two Lord Taoists immediately gasped. Inside the jade box were 3 golden fruits. The skin of the fruits was gold without any impurities. As soon as the box was opened, they smelled a sweet grass-like fragrance. Flowerless golden fruits. Lord Taoist Jinghe took a deep breath and murmured, "Yes, these are flowerless golden fruits. Judging from their color, that flowerless golden tree is at least 10,000 years old, right?" Nascent soul cultivators were nascent soul cultivators after all. They could determine the age of the flowerless golden fruits at a glance. Lord Taoist Jinyang looked for a long time before he sighed and turned to ask Qin Shi, "Where's the flowerless golden tree you found? Do you remember its location?" Qin Shi shook his head and said, "Everything changed after the changes on Demonic Mountain. Tienga and I met it by chance when we were lost. The terrain there was very special. We went back to look for it but we couldn't find it no matter what." A place like Demonic Mountain couldn't be speculated with common sense, so Qin Shi wouldn't be exposed even if he lied casually. Sure enough, Lord Taoist Jinyang didn't doubt him. He just sighed regretfully. Qin Shi asked again, "Martial Uncle Jinyang, is this thing useful for Master's injury?" Lord Taoist Jinghe answered with a smile, "Of course it's useful. Cultivators below the nascent soul realm can't bear the spiritual aura of flowerless golden fruits, but for nascent soul cultivators, 1 fruit is equivalent to several years of rest." Not bad. Lord Taoist Jinyang looked at the 3 fruits with eyes full of reluctance. It was also rare for him to see such spiritual objects. With these 3 fruits, your master's recovery time can be reduced by at least 30 years. Mo Tienga and Qin Shi glanced at each other. They were very happy. "Martial Uncle Jinyang, take a look at these medicinal pills again. Are they useful for master?" Chapter 320. After coming out of Shangqing Palace, Missouri Tienga and Qin Shi looked at each other and couldn't help laughing. Things went smoothly. The 2 nascent soul Lord Taoists didn't doubt the things they took out and confirmed that they were useful for Lord Taoist Jinghe's injuries. In addition, Lord Taoist Jinyang also told them several kinds of medicinal pills that might heal Lord Taoist Jinghe's injuries. Mo Tienga remembered that the main ingredients of these medicinal pills were in the virtual sky world, so she could make some. However, this matter didn't need to be urgent. For now, with those medicinal pills, the matter of master could be put on hold. After all, medicinal pills and flowerless golden fruits were enough for Lord Taoist Jinghe to use for several years. What about now? Go back? Qin Shi asked. Mo Tienga thought for a moment and said, "Let's go see Shui Linbo on the way." Qin Shi had no objection, so the 2 of them went back to Shangqing Palace. After seeing Shui Linbo that day, Yi Jinji told them in detail about Shui Linbo's background and what they had experienced. This child really had deep feelings for Shui Linbo. Mo Tienga was now a person who had experienced the feeling of love. After listening to him, she felt pity for him and agreed to do her best to save Shui Linbo. The 2 of them went to Mingxin residence with familiarity. Mo Tienga skillfully opened the restriction, entered the small courtyard and went to the lounge. "Linbo." Mo Tienga called out. Shui Linbo's divine sense was really slow. After a long time, she woke up and hurriedly got out of bed to open the door. "Grandmaster Shoujing, Martial Uncle Qingwei." Mo Tienga smiled and pressed her back on the bed. She and Qin Shi pulled out 2 chairs and sat in front of her. "You don't have to be nervous. We just came to see." Shui Linbo responded and then said hesitantly, "Jinji went to get his disciples' quota. He'll be back in a while." Mo Tienga smiled and said, "We came to see you." Hearing this, Shui Linbo became nervous again. How can I? It's okay." Facing the 2 of them, she was so nervous, which made Mo Tienga feel helpless. She turned to look at Qin Shi and said, "Senior martial brother, why don't you go see master first? I'll talk to Linbo." The 2 of them had just come out of Lord Taoist Jinghe's place, so she obviously wanted Qin Shi to leave first. Qin Shi also knew that Shui Linbo was so nervous because he, a nascent soul cultivator, was present, so he followed her words and said, "Okay, I'll wait for you at master's place." "All right, go ahead." Qin Shi smiled and got up to leave. The moment the door closed, Shui Linbo heaved a sigh of relief. Mo Tienga asked, "Are you afraid of him?" Shui Linbo was startled and replied in a low voice, "Martial Uncle Qingwei, please forgive me." Grandmaster Shoujing's cultivation level is so high that I'm nervous when I see him. Besides, since that incident I've been afraid to see men. Oh, I see. Mo Qianga nodded to show her understanding. She couldn't help but feel a little sympathy for Shui Linbo. In order to escape the fate of being a human furnace, she had disguised herself as a man and didn't dare to reveal her true identity. Mo Qianga regained her train of thought and asked again, "You're not afraid of Jinji?" Shui Linbo's eyes flickered and she lowered her eyes and said, "I implicated him that day but he didn't care and even suffered so much for me. Why would I be afraid of him?" Mo Qianga saw that although Shui Linbo tried to stay calm, her hands were trembling a little. She smiled and asked straightforwardly, "Do you like Jinji?" Shui Linbo trembled and raised her head. Surprise flashed in her eyes, but she slowly calmed down and answered, "I like him." Her answer was straightforward, which made Mo Qianga like her even more. She continued to ask, "Then do you want to be with him?" This question made Shui Linbo fall silent. After a while she said, "Martial Uncle Qingwei, I know I'm not talented and seriously injured, so I'm not a good match for Jinji. Before I recover, I don't want to think about this problem." Hearing this, Mo Qianga was stunned and couldn't help but recall that she also had such a self-harming thought. However, she was different from Shui Linbo. She thought that with Qin Shi's identity she didn't have much hope, but she never thought she didn't deserve him. Of course, Shui Linbo's experience was different from hers. Even if there were similarities, they couldn't think the same way. Seeing that she didn't speak, Shui Linbo felt a little uneasy. After a while she said, "Martial Uncle, I understand. Jinji is your nephew and the disciple of a nascent soul cultivator. He's not someone I can match." That's not what I mean." Mo Qianga interrupted her and said with a smile, "I won't meddle in the affairs between you and Jinji. It's his freedom to choose whoever he wants. I believe he doesn't need a Dao companion with good aptitude to help him cultivate." Shui Linbo's eyes widened when she heard this. "You mean," Mo Qianga continued, "I came to see you today for two reasons. One is to see your injury and the other is to hear about you. After all, Jinji likes you, so I also want to know more about you." She smiled and asked, "Would you like to tell me?" Shui Linbo was stunned for a long time before she reacted. "Oh, of course." She calmed down and began to speak slowly. "Back then, Martial Uncle Qingwei passed by Linhai and gave me a cultivation technique manual, so I embarked on the path to immortality. I didn't have good aptitude, so my cultivation was very slow. Fortunately, the cultivation technique manual Martial Uncle gave me was very good, so I entered the first layer of the aura refining realm smoothly. Female cultivators in Linhai can enter Bishuan Court if they have a high cultivation level, so as soon as I entered the first layer of the aura refining realm, I wanted to go to Bishuan Court's guide aunt." At this point she smiled and said, "I think Martial Uncle Qingwei knows what happened at that time. Linhai was in chaos, Bishuan Court was almost wiped out, and individual cultivators all went into hiding. At that time I was only a teenager and stupid. Going to Bishuan Court was like walking into a trap. Fortunately, someone saved me and I escaped from the wolf's den." Upon hearing this, Mo Qianga nodded. "You're lucky." "Yes." Shui Linbo smiled and said, "Although I often encountered bad luck, I always met a benefactor who saved me. The person who saved me was also a senior martial sister from Bishuan Court. After she saved me, she pitied me because I was muddle-headed, so she took me with her. Fortunately, these things didn't involve mortals. Our family lived in a remote place, so normally no cultivators would go there. That senior martial sister and I went back to the seaside and found an island in the eastern sea to hide." At this point she smiled. "In fact, that was the happiest period of my life. There were many cultivators like us hiding near that island. We were in the same boat and helped each other. If there was anything I didn't understand about cultivation, they would try their best to help me. Although we were short of materials and had no spirit veins, so my cultivation was very slow, I still felt very happy." Recalling the past, Shui Linbo was silent for a while before she continued to say, "I learned a lot there. That senior martial sister taught me a lot. Unfortunately, later she was accidentally injured by a demonic beast. We didn't have any medicinal pills at all, so we could only watch her die." She took a breath and continued to say, "Martial Uncle, you also know that my family situation isn't very good. My father fishes very hard every day and doesn't earn much money. In the end, I'm also a cultivator, so I often use immortal techniques to catch some rare fish and bring them back to exchange for money for my father. Although my cultivation level is very low, I can still do this kind of thing. This way the family situation will be much better, and Xiaobao can also go to school. How good would it be if it could always be like this?" Her voice became gloomy, she probably remembered something unpleasant again. Mo Chenga asked, "Then how did you come to Kunwu? Isn't the transporting formation from Linhai to Kunwu in Bichuan Court?" Shui Linbo shook her head with a wry smile. "I didn't come out through the transporting formation." She paused for a moment then continued, "Demonic beasts occasionally appeared near the island we lived on. Once when I went to catch fish I accidentally encountered a demonic beast. When I ran for my life I fell into a whirlpool. When I woke up I found myself in Yen country." "I see." Mo Chenga was slightly surprised. Linhai wasn't close to Yen country. It seemed this whirlpool wasn't simple, it could unexpectedly transmit people to such a far place. Shui Linbo said with a smile, "Every time my life is in danger my luck is always very good. After I arrived in Yen country I found I couldn't go back, so I had no choice but to adapt myself. When I was in Linhai, I heard that Kunwu was a holy land for cultivation. Since I came out I naturally wanted to go to Kunwu. Later, when I traveled thousands of miles to Kunwu, I found that with my qualifications, no cultivation group would accept me, so I worked in the market square to earn some spirit stones for my cultivation." Mo Chenga was no stranger to this kind of life. She and her second uncle had also lived like this. However, she was a bit puzzled. "With your qualifications without a lot of spirit stones, it's impossible for you to build your foundation. It's even difficult for you to cultivate to the 5th layer of the aura refining realm or above. How did you do it?" Shui Linbo said, "Once, I worked for a medicine shop and went to the southern forest to pick medicinal herbs. I accidentally picked several purple jade Ganoderma that were hundreds of years old and hid them. Later I sold them in batches at the trade fair. With these spirit stones, I reached the 10th layer of the aura refining realm and bought the foundation building pills." "You built your foundation on your first try?" Shui Linbo nodded. "Yes, even I can't believe it. In fact, after buying the foundation building pills, I didn't have many spirit stones left. If I couldn't build my foundation I probably wouldn't have another chance in my life. Who knew God would bless me and let me build my foundation on my first try?" Speaking up to this point she laughed. Mo Chenga nodded silently. It wasn't impossible for someone with 5 spiritual roots to build their foundation on their first try, but it was really a stroke of luck. Among thousands of people there might not even be one. Thinking of this, she secretly shrouded Shui Linbo with her divine sense. After finding that Shui Linbo was calm and didn't seem to be lying, she smiled. "It's really luck. Among the people I know, almost no one can build their foundation on their first try with 5 spiritual roots. Back then, before she met Zhong Muling and only had 5 wasted spiritual roots, she had built her foundation twice, and the second time she had to take 3 foundation building pills in a row to build her foundation. In comparison, Shui Linbo's luck wasn't just good. Yes, even I find it incredible." Shui Linbo said with a smile, "Although I've wandered around and suffered a lot over the years, God always cares for me. Every time I escaped from death, I succeeded in building my foundation on my first try. Every time I think of this, I tell myself to live well." Looking at her calm smile and confident look, Mo Chenga sighed inwardly. If this child didn't lie with her steadiness and perseverance, it was Jinji's blessing to be with her. Chapter 321. Mo Chenga found an opportunity to visit Guangzhou about Shui Linbo's injury. After forming his gold core, Senior Marshal Brother Guangzhou was as calm and indifferent as before. He didn't treat her warmly because of her current identity, nor did he treat her coldly. After a sincere invitation, Senior Marshal Brother Guangzhou finally agreed to visit Shui Linbo when he had time, which made Mo Chenga breathe a sigh of relief. The cultivation techniques practiced by medical cultivators were different from those practiced by Dharma cultivators. Their cultivation techniques paid more attention to the nourishment of the body's meridians and dantian, just like the cultivation techniques used in the secular world, but they were much more powerful. Now that he was in the core formation realm, Senior Marshal Brother Guangzhou already knew a cultivator's body like the back of his hand. Even if he couldn't cure Shui Linbo's injury, he could at least give some advice. After dealing with these chores, Mo Chenga officially moved to Qinshi's cave. Although Qinshi's cave wasn't as big as Mo Chenga's previous cave, it wasn't small either. Needless to say, the pill concocting room, the tool refining room, and the spiritual beast room were fully equipped. In addition, there were several small caves, which were originally prepared for him to accept disciples. Although there weren't many, given their personalities, they probably wouldn't accept many disciples, so it should be enough. However, the life of 2 people was different from that of 1 person. Qinshi also specially prepared a closed-door meditation room for emergencies, and his original cultivation room was shared by the two of them. With the experience of cultivating together in the virtual sky world, they both knew that cultivating in the same cultivation room wouldn't affect each other, so they could completely share the same room and didn't need to set up anything else. However, they had different opinions about the place where they usually cultivated. Do we need to arrange the cultivation room like this? Anyway, we can enter the virtual sky world to cultivate, can't we? Hearing this, Qinshi sighed and said, Tienga, maybe you haven't noticed that you don't feel any pressure when cultivating in the virtual sky world, but I don't. His words startled Mo Tienga. Pressure? Yes. Qinshi said, your spiritual roots of the origin and the art of the origin complement each other in an environment like the virtual sky world. But for me, I only feel no pressure inside the virtual sky world when I'm cultivating the art of 3 primordial cycles. At other times, whether it's the pure yang technique or other spells, the pressure is enormous. Is that so? Mo Tienga felt incredulous. Qinshi frowned and said, I've been thinking about this problem for a long time, but I still can't figure it out. If we ask Master with Master's experience, he might be able to give us some advice, but although both of them trusted Lord Taoist Jinghe, a secret wouldn't be a secret if too many people knew about it. Therefore, they only intended to help their master recuperate under other pretexts and didn't intend to tell him about the virtual sky world. Qinshi continued on, I've been thinking about it for a long time. Perhaps it's because the spiritual aura in this place is too strong. Aside from the art of 3 primordial cycles, which is confirmed to be an ancient cultivation technique, my other techniques have probably been modified by later generations. Furthermore, I have double spiritual roots. Tienga, in the end, I'm different from you. His last sentence was filled with helplessness. They were indeed different. Mo Tienga's aptitude and cultivation technique all came from the distant past era, and the environment she cultivated in was also the virtual sky world from the distant past era. Therefore, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say her state was that of an ancient cultivator. However, Qinshi wasn't like that. He was a pure cultivator of this era, and he merely cultivated the art of 3 primordial cycles. Mo Tienga also heaved a sigh. She knew what Qinshi said was true. Moreover, he was already in the nascent soul realm now, so he could feel many things more clearly than she could. Nevertheless, hope was ignited in her eyes. She said, Senior Yuan Bao is the same as you. He also cultivates the pure yang technique, but he can cultivate very well in the virtual sky world. He must have a way. Qinshi smiled. I've never doubted that. However, we might have to wait a little longer. As he stared at Mo Tienga, a lot of emotions flashed through his eyes. There was love, reluctance, helplessness, and confusion. He used to think his woman should be protected under his wings, but Mo Tienga let him know that what she wanted wasn't protection. Instead, she wanted to be connected and walk side by side with him. Now that he was in the nascent soul realm, he had enough ability to protect her, but he felt more and more helpless. In terms of cultivation level, she was inferior to him, but in terms of cultivation they couldn't stand side by side. For Mo Tienga, the virtual sky world was the best place for her to cultivate. However, after advancing to the nascent soul realm, Qinshi increasingly felt that cultivating in the virtual sky world wasn't a good choice in his current state. But what Mo Tienga said was right. Yuan Bao could cultivate in the virtual sky world, so could he. So what did he lack now? Yuan Bao had a pure yang constitution. Although he wasn't born with it, his constitution wouldn't be too bad after being transformed by the yang spiritual bead. Yuan Bao's main cultivation technique was the pure yang technique, and his pure yang technique had also been cultivated to a relatively high level. Of course, Yuan Bao was a deification cultivator. The depth of his cultivation level was still incomparable to Qinshi. Right. Qinshi's eyes flashed. After advancing to the nascent soul realm, he discovered that the nascent soul realm was much stronger than the core formation realm. The tenacity of the meridians and the capacity of the spiritual aura in the Dantian were more than 100 times higher than in the core formation realm. Similarly, when he cultivated, the spiritual aura he needed also increased to a frightening level. This was already the case from the core formation realm to the nascent soul realm. What about from the nascent soul realm to the deification realm? Yuan Bao was like a fish in water in the virtual sky world. Was it because he was a deification cultivator and the spiritual aura in the human world couldn't satisfy his cultivation, so he could adapt to the spiritual aura in the virtual sky world so well? But if that was the case, things would be troublesome. Other things were easy to deal with, but this cultivation level was something he couldn't rush. There hadn't been a deification cultivator in the celestial pole for tens of thousands of years, so he wasn't sure whether he could advance to the deification realm or not. What's wrong? Emo Chinga asked when she saw his expression changing. Qin Shi sighed and explained to her the problems he was thinking about just now. Emo Chinga also sank into contemplation. She originally thought their dual cultivation was a match made in heaven. With the addition of the yin and yang dual cultivation technique Yuan Bao gave them, their cultivation path would be much easier in the future. But when things came to a head, problems she never thought about surfaced one after another. If that was the case, they could only maintain their original cultivation pace and wouldn't be able to better use the advantages of their constitutions. The most important thing was that in the Middle Ages era, many cultivators ascended. With her current state, even if she couldn't ascend, she could at least cultivate like Zhong Muling. But what about Qin Shi? Qin Shi was a genius cultivator in this era, but the bottleneck to advance to the deification realm was difficult even for geniuses. Forget it, let's not think about it for now, Qin Shi said. I think maybe when you reach the nascent soul realm, everything will be solved. After all, our cultivation levels are still a big gap, and we can't even thoroughly understand the yin and yang dual cultivation technique. And Emo Chinga also knew that if Qin Shi couldn't think of a solution, it would be very difficult for her to think of one with her cultivation level and vision. Fortunately, they had a lot of time and didn't need to be in a hurry. Since Qin Shi already knew about the existence of the virtual sky world, there was no need to hide those medicinal pills. Nascent soul cultivators could live for more than 1,000 years. If their cultivation level was high and they took good care of themselves, it wasn't impossible for them to live for more than 2,000 years. Coupled with the longevity pills concocted from the spiritual herbs in the virtual sky world, Qin Shi could live for more than 2,000 years. Right now he was only a little over 200 years old. As for Emo Chinga, a core formation cultivator's lifespan was about 600 to 800 years. She had also taken longevity pills so she could live for more than 1,000 years. Besides, she was very confident in her cultivation speed. Even if she didn't take 100 years, she could still form her nascent soul in 200 years. In this way, these problems could be solved slowly in more than 1,000 years' time. There's one more thing. Emo Chinga remembered. What do you think of Shui Linbua? Although Qin Shi didn't participate in the conversation with Shui Linbua, with the power of a nascent soul cultivator, his divine sense had never left Mingxin residence, so he clearly knew the content of their conversation. Qin Shi thought for a moment and said, except for the fact that her origin can't be verified, there are no other flaws. Emo Chinga nodded. This was also her conclusion. Shui Linbua said she came from the Eastern Sea and was an old friend. However, at that time An was still young, so she couldn't recognize her at all. In other words, she couldn't confirm whether Shui Linbua was really the little girl from the Eastern Sea. In addition, everything else she said could be verified. With the manpower of Xianqing School, it wasn't difficult to investigate the experience of an individual cultivator, and she had already secretly ordered the steward's hall to handle this matter. Don't worry too much. Qin Shi comforted her. She's a foundation-building cultivator after all, and the whole Shangqing Palace is under the control of Master's divine sense. If there was anything wrong with her, Master would have warned us. Emo Chinga thought about it and agreed. Maybe the two of them didn't have enough experience, but Master was a real old fox. Even if he was seriously injured now, it was impossible for a small foundation-building cultivator to deceive him. It was difficult for a low-level cultivator to lie under the spiritual aura pressure of a high-level cultivator. After pondering for a while, Emo Chinga suddenly smiled. The two of us are actually worried about a foundation-building cultivator. Alas. Qin Shi smiled and said, we have to be careful. It's fine if she's just an ordinary disciple. Which cultivation group doesn't have a few spies from other cultivation groups? But Jinji has feelings for her, so things are different. Jinji is my only disciple and also your nephew. He can be said to be our closest junior. If they perform dual cultivation, Shui Linbua's identity will be unusual. Emo Chinga suddenly had an idea and said, by the way, if there's nothing suspicious about her, I can accept her as my disciple. I remember she has 5 spiritual roots, so maybe she can practice the art of the origin. Qin Shi couldn't help but smile. How can a cultivator with 5 spiritual roots casually practice the art of the origin? I think it's because Shui Linbua likes your temperament. You also want Jinji to feel at ease, right? Emo Chinga lowered her head in embarrassment when he hit the nail on the head, but she felt she was right, so she said confidently, I'm a core formation cultivator now, so it's only right for me to accept a disciple. At least, I can ask someone to run errands for me. And it's only right. Qin Shi nodded, but the next moment he glanced at her with a faint smile. However, Master Daoist Qingwei, you're a genius who formed your gold core within 100 years, and you're also Lord Daoist Jinghe's last disciple and Lord Daoist Shoujing's dual cultivation Dao companion. What disciple can't you accept? Why do you have to accept a disciple with 5 spiritual roots who's half dead? Mo Qingge laughed dryly and had to admit it. Fine, if Shui Linbo recovers, Jinji will most likely perform dual cultivation with her. At that time I'll accept her as my disciple as a gift to Jinji. Qin Shi agreed, but he emphasized, we'll talk about this later. At the very least, we have to clearly investigate her origin and make sure there's no doubt about it. Don't worry, I know that. Chapter 322. Before long, the nascent soul ceremony was held as scheduled. It was very low-key this time. Only some friendly sects of Xianqing school received invitations and came to participate. However, the guests who came were led by at least core formation cultivators. The standard wasn't any lower than last time. Because of this, Mo Qingge was very busy. There weren't many guests, but they were at least core formation cultivators, so they needed to receive them. She was Qin Shi's Dao companion now, so she obviously couldn't stay out of it. Compared to receiving guests, the real soul formation ceremony was actually very simple. Just like last time, under the witness of all the disciples and guests, Qin Shi paid his respects to the 3 Pure One's patriarchs, accepted the title of Grand Supreme Elder, and kowtowed to express his gratitude for his master's kindness. Unlike last time, after kowtowing to thank his master, Mo Qingge also went forward and reported to Lord Daoist Jinghe with Qin Shi, asking him to allow them to become Dao companions. Afterward, the nascent soul ceremony ended and the guests were invited. This time, Mo Qingge finally didn't need to accompany the guests. She and Qin Shi followed Lord Daoist Jinghe back to Shanqing Palace. Today Lord Daoist Jinghe wore a Chengkuan Daoist robe, a Chengkuan crown, a pair of 8 trigram shoes, and traditional nascent soul Daoist clothing of Xianqing school. He looked extraordinary and his face was carefully groomed. His short beard was neat. However, as soon as he entered Shanqing Palace, his body swayed and he couldn't even stand steadily. Master! Mo Qingge and Qin Shi called out in unison and hurried to help him. With their help, Lord Daoist Jinghe sat back on the dragon chair in the hall. His black hair quickly faded and turned pure white. For this nascent soul ceremony, Lord Daoist Jinghe used a secret technique to temporarily restore his appearance to before he was injured. After all, he was the second nascent soul expert in Xianqing school, second only to Lord Daoist Jinyang. If his old appearance was seen by the guests, today's nascent soul ceremony wouldn't achieve its purpose of announcing Xianqing school's strength. After sitting down, Lord Daoist Jinghe took a breath and waved his hand, signaling the two to let him go. Mo Qingge asked with concern, Master, how are you? Lord Daoist Jinghe swallowed a medicinal pill, shook his head and said with a smile, Fortunately, I have these medicinal pills you prepared. I'm fine. Then he closed his eyes and meditated. Mo Qingge felt a bit relieved after hearing what Lord Daoist Jinghe said. Although his hair still turned white, his face wasn't as old as it was when they first came back. This was a good sign because it showed that Lord Daoist Jinghe's cultivation level was continuously recovering. After a while, Lord Daoist Jinghe opened his eyes. After adjusting his breathing, his complexion looked much better. He raised his head to look at his 2 disciples and smiled, Thanks to the flowerless golden fruit you brought back, Master's meridians have recovered quite a bit. As long as I have enough medicinal pills, I should be able to recover to my peak state within 50 years. If I'm lucky, I might be able to reach the late stage of nascent soul during this process. That would be a blessing in disguise. Mo Qingge and Qin Shi glanced at each other, but they didn't feel very happy. Although what Master said might not be impossible, how many cultivators have been stuck at the early stage of nascent soul for hundreds or even thousands of years? The nascent soul stage had never been difficult to cultivate, but it was difficult to advance. The breakthrough of a small stage was no less than the bottleneck of nascent soul formation. With a sigh in his heart, Qin Shi said, Master, rest assured. I'm already a nascent soul cultivator now, so I have the ability to search for medicine for you. Yes. This time, Lord Daoist Jinghe didn't refuse. His strength was right in front of him. Qin Shi was now a nascent soul cultivator who could stand shoulder to shoulder with him. By the way, the medicinal power of those 3 flowerless golden fruits is too strong, so I can't take them all at once. You've just formed your nascent soul, so your realm isn't stable yet, so you can't take such spiritual medicine. Therefore, I gave one to your martial uncle Jinyang. I'll let Master decide on these matters, Qin Shi said softly. When they harvested the flowerless golden fruits, they were worried they wouldn't have enough, so they plucked all the fruits from the tree. These fruits couldn't be kept for too long. If they weren't taken in time, their spiritual aura would be lost, so giving one to Lord Taoist Jinyang was the most appropriate way to deal with them. After all, Lord Taoist Jinyang also contributed a lot to Lord Taoist Jinghe's injury. Lord Taoist Jinghe's eyes flashed as he stared at the two disciples in front of him. He asked, "Did the two of you encounter some difficulties while cultivating?" This question startled the two of them. Mo Chenga said, "Master, how did you know?" Lord Taoist Jinghe chuckled. "What haven't Master seen? I've long felt it wouldn't be easy for you to perform dual cultivation." Qin Shi suddenly thought of something and asked, "Master, which direction do you think we'll encounter problems?" "What? Are you testing me?" Lord Taoist Jinghe glanced at him and said with a faint smile, "In my opinion, the problem might be the incompatibility of your cultivation techniques." Mo Chenga and Qin Shi looked at each other. Although it wasn't very accurate, it wasn't far off. Lord Taoist Jinghe looked very confident. "What? Is Master wrong?" Qin Shi nodded helplessly. "Yes, Master, why do you think so?" "It's very simple," Lord Taoist Jinghe said. "In the end, Chenga's situation is too complicated. She has both a pure Yin constitution and a spiritual root of the origin, which can't be used without a special cultivation technique. If the two of you don't choose cultivation techniques that match your constitutions and only perform dual cultivation based on your constitutions, the effect will be much worse. Not to mention the virtual sky world, this was indeed the problem they encountered now." Qin Shi couldn't help but ask, "Master, do you have any solution?" "No." Lord Taoist Jinghe shook his head. Lord Taoist Jinghe simply shook his head. "I've seen more than you, but I'm not omnipotent. Do you think I know everything?" He paused for a moment, then said in a relaxed tone, "However, Master can give you a suggestion." Mo Chenga's and Qin Shi's eyes brightened and they stared at him. Lord Taoist Jinghe smiled and said, You should enter closed-door meditation to stabilize your realm first." Qin Shi was stunned and said in disbelief, "Master, what kind of suggestion is that? It wouldn't help their situation at all." Lord Taoist Jinghe smiled. "Although you're a nascent soul cultivator now, you haven't fully understood the true meaning of this realm, so there are many things you can't understand for a while. It's very simple to solve this problem, but the method is also very stupid. That is, enter closed-door meditation to stabilize your realm and fully understand the state of the nascent soul realm." At this point he warned Qin Shi earnestly, "Boy, the nascent soul realm isn't that simple. People say that once you reach the nascent soul realm, you'll have the ability to move mountains, overturn seas and land. This isn't an exaggeration. When you completely reach the level of the nascent soul stage, you will understand the horror of the nascent soul stage. In this level, you will be able to completely grasp the profoundness of cultivation arts, and you will be able to use some secret arts with ease. You can even create your own cultivation arts." Qin Shi was silent, but his eyes flashed. He had heard about these things sporadically, but after he reached the nascent soul realm, he found it wasn't so exaggerated. He thought it was just people exaggerating, but his master wouldn't lie to him. Creating his own cultivation technique. Only by understanding the true secret of spiritual aura could he create his own cultivation technique. If he really reached that realm, the dual cultivation technique between him and Mo Chenga could be modified based on their actual situation. In other words, he could create a cultivation technique unique to the two of them. Lord Taoist Jinghe showed a satisfied smile. "You're a smart child. The master leads the way, but the cultivation depends on the individual. This saying also applies in the cultivation world. I can only tell you this much about the nascent soul realm. Next, you have to rely on yourself to understand it." Qin Shi carefully pondered his words in his heart. In the end he nodded. "I understand, Master." Lord Taoist Jinghe nodded with a smile. "All right, I'll go back and continue my closed-door meditation. With these medicinal pills, I won't come out for 10 years. You two can go now." "Yes, Master." The two of them respectfully excused themselves. Qin Shi's mood surged after hearing those words. He took Mo Chenga's hand and went back to his cave, but he still couldn't restrain his emotions. "Chenga. En?" Mo Chenga stared at him. Qin Shi's current expression clearly showed that he had made a decision. This was also related to her future path. "After a while, when these mundane things are done, I'll enter closed-door meditation." Qin Shi sighed, looked down at her and said softly, "I'll enter closed-door meditation here." He emphasized it like this because he didn't plan to enter the virtual sky world anymore. Mo Chenga didn't say anything. In fact, she was already prepared in her heart. There were still many problems to solve between them. With Qinshi's personality, he wouldn't covet the little convenience in the virtual sky world and give up exploring the true meaning of the nascent soul. He stayed in the virtual sky world for 10 years, and his art of 3 primordial cycles had been cultivated to a certain realm. His cultivation speed for other cultivation techniques and secret techniques was far slower than the art of 3 primordial cycles, so in this case, staying in his cave for closed-door meditation was much better than entering the virtual sky world. But in this way the two of them would have to separate again. She didn't feel it was unbearable. How could cultivators stay together forever? Each of them would enter closed-door meditation for a few years or a few decades. They were both people with firm Tao hearts. If they stayed together all the time, it would go against their hearts. I understand. Seeing that she agreed calmly but her eyes were full of reluctance, Qinshi couldn't help but hug her. Half a day later, everything stopped. Qinshi thought for a while then asked hesitantly, "Do you still remember one thing?" Mo Chenga took some time to put on her outer robe. Wanderer Ziwei's 200-year agreement, Qinshi said, 59 years have passed, so there are only 140 years left. Finding the remains of a cultivator who died 5,000 years ago isn't easy, so we should start as soon as possible. Mo Chenga remembered. She hadn't done it before because she wasn't strong enough. Now that she was a core formation cultivator with a natal magic weapon in hand, she could give it a try. However, she couldn't figure it out for the time being. She thought for a while then said, "It's better to let the steward's hall inquire about this first. Once we have some clues we can slowly look for it." She also thought it was safer this way. "If there's any news, remember to wait for me when I come out of closed-door meditation, then we can go together." He remembered that Wanderer Ziwei's Tao companion was also a nascent soul cultivator. The place where a nascent soul cultivator died was definitely not simple. He was afraid she would be in danger alone. Mo Chenga hesitated for a moment but still agreed. "I understand." Chapter 323. Shortly after the nascent soul ceremony, the steward's hall had investigated Shui Limbuo's background and reported it. According to the preliminary investigation, Shui Limbuo wasn't lying. Except for what happened in Linhai, the steward's hall had investigated all her encounters and found nothing suspicious. Since there was nothing suspicious, Mo Chenga felt relieved. Yijinji was the junior closest to her and Qinshi. His Tao companion could have poor aptitudes and a low cultivation level, but she absolutely couldn't harbor evil intentions. In addition, what reassured Mo Chenga was that compared to Yijinji, Shui Limbuo's character was much steadier and she had experienced a lot more. If she could supervise him from time to time, she could cultivate with ease and let go of Yijinji. As for Shui Limbuo's injury, after confirming her identity, Mo Chenga asked Guangzhu to take care of her. No matter what precious materials he needed, he could just ask her. Not to mention other things, with her current status as a core formation elder, she could afford the cost of treating Shui Limbuo. She could also afford any precious materials he needed. There was no need to worry about Lord Daoist Jinghe in the short term. Shui Limbuo's injury was also under Guangzhu's care. There were also some miscellaneous matters that had finally been sorted out. In the following days, what she had to pay attention to was Qinshi's closed-door meditation. Qinshi's closed-door meditation this time was no small matter. According to his initial estimation, it would take at least 10 to 20 years. In that case he had to prepare a lot of things. Mo Chenga felt it was impossible for her to stay in Shenqing school during this period of time. She'd stayed in the virtual sky world for 10 years. With the help of dual cultivation, her cultivation level had successfully reached the peak of the early stage of the core formation realm. It'd be best if she didn't enter closed-door meditation in the short term. Since that was the case, she had to go out to travel and handle affairs. In that case, she had to leave something for Qinshi, such as some special medicinal pills. There was also her master. She couldn't concoct all of the pills, but at the very least she had to concoct 1 or 2 types so that her master could use them to treat his injuries when he came out of closed-door cultivation. Concocting pills, concocting medicines, cultivating, studying magic weapons, and occasionally giving pointers to Jinji and Shui Limbuo. 2 years passed quickly. Although the past 2 years had been peaceful, it had been very fulfilling. Becoming Tao companions with Qinshi didn't bring any trouble to his life. Their personalities were compatible, and after the time they spent in the virtual sky world, they quickly adapted to the life of 2 people. Just as Qinshi was about to enter closed-door meditation, Mo Chenga sensed a familiar aura coming from afar. It was her weak divine sense. 10,000 miles sound transmitting talisman. Mo Chenga carefully recalled that she seemed to have only given the 10,000 miles sound transmitting talisman to one person, and that person was the sect head of Bishuan Court, Wei Haolan. However, this aura wasn't very far from her. It should be somewhere in Kuanzhong City. Could it be that someone from Bishuan Court came to Kunwo? Mo Chenga told Qin Shi about this matter. Qin Shi frowned and thought for a while. They know your identity, so why didn't they come looking for you directly? Why did they send out a 10,000 miles sound transmitting talisman instead? This was exactly what Mo Chenga was worried about. I think maybe this person encountered some kind of danger, so he had no choice but to use this method to contact me. Qin Shi also thought so. He thought for a moment, then said, "How about I go with you?" "I don't." Mo Chenga stared at him and said helplessly, "You're a nascent soul cultivator now, and you've been preparing for closed-door meditation for such a long time. Why do you want to accompany me everywhere?" Qin Shi was a bit embarrassed by her words. He said, "I'm a bit worried. In any case, I'm a core formation cultivator. Now, I'm just a step away from breaking through to the middle stage of the early stage. All these years, you've taught me a lot about fights of magical powers. Don't tell me I can't even handle such a small matter?" Qin Shi was speechless. If it was any other core formation cultivator, he wouldn't have this kind of thought. Even when she was still a foundation-building cultivator and she was traveling outside, he didn't worry about her like this. Now he could only say he was confused because he was too concerned. "Listen to me," Mo Chenga said cautiously. "You should focus on your closed-door meditation. I'll handle these things myself." Seeing that Qin Shi seemed to want to say something, she raised her hand to stop him. She stared straight at him and said, "Trust me, okay?" After thinking for a while, Qin Shi sighed helplessly and nodded. "All right, I know I should trust you no matter what aspect it is." Now that she had obtained his permission, Mo Chenga smiled. In a flash, she sat on his lap and leaned forward to kiss him. "All right, you should focus on your closed-door meditation. I hope everything will be solved by the time you come out." Qin Shi pressed her down. "That's not enough." Several days later, while Qin Shi was in closed-door meditation, Mo Chenga left Xianqing School and headed for Kuanzhong City to search for the aura of the 10,000 miles sound-transmitting talisman. Although the place where the 10,000 miles sound-transmitting talisman was sent wasn't far, it wasn't close either. For a core formation cultivator, it would take them at least several days to fly to reach Kuanzhong City. Mo Chenga didn't know whether she would make it in time when she arrived, so she could only try her best. Back then, she and second uncle also used a 10,000 miles sound-transmitting talisman to ask Qin Shi for help. Coincidentally, Qin Shi happened to be nearby. Otherwise, by the time he arrived or sent Xianqing school disciples to investigate, she and second uncle would have already died without a burial place. This kind of 10,000 miles sound-transmitting talisman sealed the cultivator's own divine sense. Even if it was thousands of miles away, the cultivator could still trace the place where the sound-transmitting talisman was crushed. Moreover, the reaction time of the divine sense was also relatively long. It could remain for nearly a month, which was enough for Mo Chenga to find that place. The speed of the cloud-treading boots reached its peak. In just a few days, Mo Chenga landed outside Kuanzhong City. The place where she crushed the 10,000 miles sound-transmitting talisman was inside Kuanzhong City. Now that she was close, Mo Chenga confirmed the direction and followed the imprint left by her divine sense. Unexpectedly, it was the restaurant where Qin Shi took her to meet up with Taoist Kumu and the others 12 years ago. Back then, she just advanced to the core formation realm, and even using her divine sense in Kuanzhong City made her feel uncomfortable. 12 years had passed, and those core formation experts who looked down on her in this restaurant back then had already turned into ashes, but she was already in the core formation realm with ease. This road to longevity was just this cruel. After the great waves washed away the sand, the new generation replaced the old. Back then, Lord Taoist Jinghe was furious about Yi Jinji's matter, and Master Taoist Mingzhen slaughtered the individual cultivators' alliance in Kuanzhong City. Because of that, Xianqing School also became a malefic existence in Kuanzhong City. Although Kuanzhong City was still a city of individual cultivators and a city of trade, it was no longer as neutral as before. Upon seeing the Xianqing School Taoist robe Mo Chenga was wearing, the restaurant's manager came to welcome her and greeted her with great enthusiasm. "This lowly one greets Fairy. Fairy, may I ask how I can help you?" Mo Chenga followed the imprint left by her divine sense and went upstairs. After making several turns, she pointed at a room. "Who lived in this room half a month ago?" "Half a month ago?" The manager was dumbfounded. Fairy, this room is also occupied by 2 master immortals. They've indeed been here for half a month, but they haven't checked out yet. 2 master immortals? Mo Chinga's gaze shifted. Did Bichuan Court send a male cultivator? Her divine sense had already enveloped the entire inn, but there was no one in this room. Did they go out? This? The manager shook his head. Fairy, this lowly one is just a mortal. If the master immortals went out, this lowly one wouldn't know. This was also the truth. Aside from low-level cultivators, which cultivator would go through the front door when staying in an inn? They just fly out directly. Just as Mo Chinga was thinking about how to deal with this, she saw the manager staring at her in fear, so she said, "You can go now. I came to look for someone." How could the manager dare to say no? He just answered respectfully, then turned around and left. After the manager left, Mo Chinga's spiritual aura fluctuated, and the room's door opened. She stepped into the room, swept her gaze around, and her divine sense enveloped the room. She frowned. The 10,000-mile sound-transmitting talisman was indeed crushed here, and there were other cultivators' breaths in this room. However, this wasn't good news. Because based on the remaining breaths, she speculated that one of the 2 people was at least a core formation cultivator. Bichuan Court shouldn't have a core formation cultivator so soon, so this person fell into the hands of a core formation cultivator? However, there were no defensive formations or restrictions laid in this place. Apparently, these 2 cultivators only treated this place as a temporary residence. Mo Chinga pondered for a while, then put her hand into her Chengkuan bag and took out several things. They were formation discs and formation flags. She hadn't used formations to fight enemies for a long time, so the current situation was very suitable for laying a trap here. With a faint smile, her sleeves fluttered, and the formation discs and formation flags flew out and fell one after another. In just a moment, the formation was set up properly. She then walked to a corner and laid spirit stones. With this 4 symbols 100 flowers formation, even if this core formation cultivator's cultivation level was higher than hers, it wouldn't be difficult to deal with him. Once she was done, Mo Chinga took out the heaven and earth fan and leisurely leaned against the window, sipping tea and watching the street view. Time passed by bit by bit. It was noon when she arrived, but the person still hadn't come back even when night fell. Mo Chinga wasn't worried. Since he didn't check out of the room, he probably hadn't left. If he really left, she didn't even know who sent the summoning talisman, so she didn't have any way to track him, so she might as well continue to wait. She waited until the moon was high in the sky. In the dead of night, the shops in Kuanzhong City closed one after another. Mo Chinga sat cross-legged on a chair, silently adjusting her breath. Suddenly, her divine sense tightened, and she immediately hid her breath completely. Although her breath-concealing technique wasn't brilliant, she had the spirit-concealing pendant. Not to mention a core formation cultivator, even a nascent soul cultivator wouldn't be able to detect her for a while. Then 2 breaths appeared nearby. One was in the middle stage of the foundation building realm, and the other was in the late stage of the core formation realm. Mo Chinga was shocked. They were actually in the late stage of the core formation realm. Was she confident? The thought flashed in her mind, but she calmed down again. What was there to be afraid of? She wasn't the Mo Qingwei who had just formed her gold core 12 years ago. With a magic weapon like the heaven and earth fan in hand, 10 years of exploration and Qinshi's guidance, her strength in fights of magical powers had improved a lot. Moreover, she now had the 4 symbols 100 flowers formation as her backing. The person was getting closer and closer, and Mo Chinga heard a voice. "Brat, can't you calm down a bit? When have I ever mistreated you, senior? Run, run, run. Where can you run to?" The voice sounded a bit familiar. Mo Chinga frowned slightly, still holding the heaven and earth fan in her hand tightly. Even if it might be an acquaintance, she had to subdue it first. Then she heard another familiar voice pleading, "Senior, just let me go, okay? You won't get any benefits from holding me, Tang Xin." Mo Chinga raised her eyebrows. This was Tang Xin's voice. He actually came to Kunwo? Chapter 324. Although she hadn't seen Tang Xin for 40 years, Mo Chinga wouldn't mistake his tone. After all, they were both locked up in Bichuan Court's Dao Achieving Pagoda for 20 years, so they were already familiar with Tang Xin's tone and habitual phrases. They stopped outside, and the core formation cultivator who caught Tang Xin said indifferently, "Let you go? Brat, I was almost killed to save you. Is this how you treat your savior?" Tang Xin was speechless. I. Inside the room, Mo Chinga, who had concealed her breath, frowned slightly. Did he mean Tang Xin was snatched from someone else? She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This Tang Shen. Didn't he know he had a pure yang constitution and would be discovered by high-level cultivators if he didn't keep a low profile? Although a pure yang constitution wasn't as eye-catching as a pure yin constitution, if one or two high-level female cultivators fell in love with him, it would be a disaster. Even if he didn't think of it, Wei Haolan wouldn't think of it either, right? She actually let him come to Kunwu just like that. She didn't know whether someone came with him or not, and if so, where was he now? She needed Tang Shen to answer so many questions. Mo Qingge clenched the heaven and earth fan in her hand. No matter what, she had to save Tang Shen first. Brat, you're lucky to run into me. You have to be grateful, understand? After the man finished speaking, a sword aura suddenly shot through the window. Mo Qingge unfolded the heaven and earth fan. Mountains and rivers appeared indistinctly, blocking the sword aura. Then she shook her sleeves, activating the formation disc and the formation flags. The 4 symbols 100 flowers formation was ready to be launched. Seeing that his attack didn't succeed, the man immediately retreated and said coldly, "A mere early-stage core formation cultivator dares to ambush me. Your breath-concealing technique is brilliant, but unfortunately, my divine sense found you one step ahead of me." Mo Qingge's heart trembled. I see. She thought her divine sense was strong enough, but this man's divine sense wasn't weak either. Before she concealed her breath, he'd already discovered her. She had to pay attention to this point in the future. She mustn't neglect it again. However, although this man was a late-stage core formation cultivator and a sword cultivator, she wasn't afraid. She had already figured out how to use the heaven and earth fan, and with the 4 symbols 100 flowers formation here, her chances of winning were extremely high. Even if she couldn't win, she could still run away. The 4 symbols 100 flowers formation was activated, and light shone. The 4 symbols divine beasts flickered faintly at its 4 corners, and countless flower petals fluttered above the light barrier. Whether it was the 4 symbols or the 100 flowers, they were the result of spiritual energy flashing. They weren't real, but the killing intent hidden within them was real. The sword light flashed again and shot in through the window. However, the moment it touched the 4 symbols 100 flowers formation, it was blocked by the light shield. At the same time, countless petals rushed out and almost swallowed the person. Through the window, Mo Qingge saw the man pulling Tang Shen. Sword lights danced around his body, blocking all the petals outside. In the end, his sword aura surged and pushed all the petals back. The petals scattered, revealing a male cultivator dressed in blue robes. "It's you," Mo Qingge shouted. Hearing her voice, both of them were startled at the same time. Tang Shen was then overjoyed. "Elder Yi." This sword cultivator in the late stage of the core formation realm in blue robes was Jing Xingji. Jing Xingji slowed down and showed a puzzled expression. After a while, he seemed to recognize her voice. "You're Mo Qingwei?" Mo Qingge held the formation flag in her hand. With a light wave, the 4 symbols 100 flowers formation stopped. She said, "Yes, fellow Taoist Jing, long time no see." Although she said this calmly, Mo Qingge's heart was in turmoil. The last time she saw Jing Xingji was when she ran into Master Song Feng and almost fell into his trap. When she woke up later, Jing Xingji was no longer there. She told him to leave first. This action made Mo Qingge feel relieved at that time. Even though nothing had happened, it was still unpleasant to see Jing Xingji. It had been a long time since the incident happened. She and She were living well and had long forgotten about Jing Xingji. She didn't expect him to also escape from Demonic Mountain and meet him here. Jing Xingji was silent for a while, then said, "Long time no see." The light in the room was lit. Mo Qingge opened the window and Jing Xingji landed with Tang Shen. After more than 10 years, Jing Xingji still looked the same. However, he seemed to be injured now and his spiritual aura was a bit unstable. Tang Shen was happy. As soon as he saw Mo Qingge, he was pleasantly surprised. "Elder Yi, it's really you? You've advanced to the core formation realm." Mo Qingge smiled at him. Tang Shen's cultivation level was still in the middle stage of the foundation building realm, but he was already at the peak. Maybe he came to Kunwu this time to gain experience? Then she said to Jing Xingji, "Fellow Taoist Jing, I don't know how my friend offended you. If he did, I'll apologize to you on his behalf." Jing Xingji glanced at her, then looked at Tang Shen with a frown. "You know each other?" "Yes." Mo Qingge still smiled. "Fellow Taoist Jing, please be magnanimous." After a while, seeing that Jing Xingji didn't respond, she said, "If my friend offended you, fellow Taoist Jing, please tell me. I'll compensate for him." "Compensate?" Jing Xingji glanced at her with a faint smile. "How will fellow Taoist Qingwei compensate him?" This child has a pure yang constitution, so he's a good target for female cultivators to pluck. I'm afraid you can't compensate someone like him, right? Mo Chinga's expression changed. Jing Xingji actually knows about Tang Xin's constitution? What did this Tang Xin do to attract other people's attention? Although constitutions and spiritual roots couldn't be concealed from high-level cultivators, which high-level cultivator would be so bored as to check the aptitudes of low-level cultivators for no reason? But Jing Xingji's tone changed. Since fellow Taoist Qingwei said so, it wouldn't be good for me to not let him go. Fellow Taoist can just take this boy away. His eyes flashed, but he said, I just don't know if fellow Taoist Shoujing will be jealous if he finds out. Mo Qinga paused for a moment, then her expression turned cold. You don't need to worry about this, fellow Taoist Jing. Jing Xingji smiled. He didn't get angry and said to Tang Xin, boy, you can go now. Tang Xin didn't dare to believe that he got his freedom so easily. Senior, are you really willing to let me go? Jing Xingji lowered his eyes and said, if it was someone else I wouldn't mind. Since Mo Qingwei asked, how could I refuse? Mo Qinga should be happy that Jing Xingji gave her face like this, but the meaning behind his words made it seem like the two of them had a special relationship, which made her feel suffocated. Just as she felt annoyed, she heard Jing Xingji continue to say, in any case, I wronged you and Qin Shoujing before. Today I'll return this boy to you, so I'll pay you back. Mo Qinga was stunned, and the unhappiness in her heart vanished. That matter wasn't Jing Xingji's fault. He also fell into her trap, but he still felt that he wronged her and Qin Shi, which could be considered as having some affection for them. After a moment of silence, Mo Qinga said softly, thank you, fellow Taoist Jing. Jing Xingji waved his hand, found a chair to sit down, and was about to pour a cup of tea when he suddenly coughed twice. Mo Qinga could hear the surging spiritual aura in his coughs. Obviously he was injured and couldn't suppress it anymore. She thought for a moment, then took out a jade bottle from inside her robe and put it down. She said, these medicinal pills can be considered my thanks to you on his behalf. From the conversation she heard with Tang Xin before, Jing Xingji snatched Tang Xin from someone else's hands. From this point of view, it could be said that Jing Xingji saved Tang Xin. Jing Xingji's gaze fell on the jade bottle, but he didn't refuse. Then I won't be polite. Mo Qinga smiled, gave Tang Xin a meaningful look and said, that being the case, we'll take our leave first. See you later. Jing Xingji nodded but turned around, no longer looking at them. With a wave of her hand, Mo Qinga summoned the white silk handkerchief and flew away with Tang Xin. The sky was already dark, and the city gate of Quanzhong City was closed. There were restrictions on the city gate, so it was very troublesome to break them. Mo Qinga thought for a moment, then took Tang Xin to Xianqing School's branch in Quanzhong City to settle down for the time being. The arrival of a core formation elder made the manager of this branch very nervous. When he found out that Mo Qinga was only here to stay, he vacated a very good courtyard for her. After the two of them settled down in the courtyard and Mo Qinga dismissed the others, she finally had a chance to ask Tang Xin, what happened? Why did you come to Kunwu and still fall into someone else's hands? Tang Xin was surprised to see a group of foundation-building cultivators treating Mo Qinga with respect. Upon hearing her question, he hastily answered, Elder Yi, I came to look for you. Mo Qinga was even more puzzled. That day I left my identity and name. Since you came to look for me, you should have come to Xianqing School and asked to see me. Why was I captured midway? What kind of accident happened in the end? Also, why did you come to look for me? It couldn't be that there was a problem with Bishuan Court, right? Upon hearing her question, Tang Xin immediately told her these things bit by bit, not daring to omit any details. As it turned out, Tang Xin came to Kunwu more than 10 years ago. All these years, Bishuan Court never produced a core formation cultivator, so Tang Xin had always held the position of an elder. However, ever since they discovered a spirit stone vein in the Eastern Sea, Bishuan Court's situation improved a lot. They could now afford any medicinal pills or spiritual objects they needed. Tang Xin came to Kunwu because two late-stage Bishuan Court cultivators' cultivation was progressing smoothly, so they could prepare to form their gold cores. Medicinal pills for forming one's gold core couldn't be bought even in Kunwu with spirit stones, so Wei Haolan had no choice but to ask Mo Qinga for help. Since Mo Qinga was a disciple of a big cultivation group, she might have some connections, so she wanted to ask Mo Qinga for help. When Tang Xin heard about this, he insisted on coming to Kunwu. Wei Haolan originally didn't agree, but Tang Xin was very determined. Since she couldn't win him over, she let him come. Speaking of which, Tang Xin was really unlucky. Tang Shen was no longer the young Master Tang who knew nothing in the past. Ever since he arrived in Kunwu, he always kept a low profile, but his appearance as the son of an aristocratic family still attracted bad people in the end. His strength wasn't weak, but after he counterattacked, he happened to run into a nascent soul cultivator who was interested in him. As a result, that nascent soul cultivator discovered Mo Chenga's constitution and immediately captured him. At that time, Demonic Mountain was about to open. That nascent soul cultivator took Mo Chenga with him and entered Demonic Mountain. Originally, he planned to deal with Mo Chenga after they left Demonic Mountain. Apparently, he wanted to use Mo Chenga as a human furnace for a junior. Unexpectedly, an unforeseen event happened on Demonic Mountain. That nascent soul cultivator died on Demonic Mountain, and Tang Shen fell into the hands of that cultivator's disciple. That nascent soul cultivator's disciple's cultivation level was already in the middle stage of the core formation realm. Because Jade Palace was dangerous, that nascent soul cultivator let his disciple take Tang Shen out of Demonic Mountain first. Because of that, the two of them escaped a calamity. Chapter 325. Did Jing Xingji save you? Mo Chenga asked after listening to Tang Shen's experience. Tang Shen blushed slightly and nodded. Sort of. After we came out of Demonic Mountain, the fatty was seriously injured and hid in Mount Yuheng to recuperate. During those years, I tried to escape several times but failed. Later, when he recovered, he wanted to take me somewhere. We met Senior Jing on the way. They were from the same sect, but Senior Jing seemed to have a grudge against him, so they fought. That fatty thought Senior Jing was injured, so he disregarded their friendship and wanted to take the opportunity to kill him and steal his treasure. In the end, he was killed by Senior Jing. Is that so? Mo Chenga muttered to herself. Right. Tang Shen just said the nascent soul cultivator who caught him was called Venerable Swordsman Fuling, one of Gujian sect's nascent soul venerables. Jing Xingji actually fought with his disciple. It seemed his days in Gujian sect were really hard. Now that he killed a fellow disciple and was injured, he probably couldn't go back to Gujian sect, right? Mo Chenga thought for a while, then shook her head. She didn't need to worry about Jing Xingji. Recalling how Tang Shen called that core formation cultivator fatty, but called Jing Xingji Senior Jing, she asked, "Did Jing Xingji treat you well?" Tang Shen hesitated for a moment, then said, "And aside from not letting me go, he occasionally gave me some pointers." At this point, he scratched his head in embarrassment. "I'm sorry, Elder Yi. Senior Jing said that he wanted to exchange me for healing elixirs, so I was nervous and used the 10,000-mile sound-transmitting talisman to make you come all the way here to save me." Mo Chenga smiled. "It's nothing. Jing Xingji isn't a good person. Even if he treats you well, he won't let you go unconditionally. In my opinion, there's a 60 to 70% chance he's telling the truth when he said he wanted to exchange you for medicinal pills." "Really?" Tang Shen thought for a moment, then sighed. "I know he's not necessarily a good person, but he's not too bad to me. I thought I was careful enough, but when I arrived in Kunwu, I realized I was still lacking." Speaking like this, Tang Shen seemed to have matured a lot. He wasn't younger than Mo Chenga, and they had been separated for several decades, so it was inevitable that Tang Shen would grow up. Mo Chenga showed a faint smile. "Fellow Taoist Tang, you can't be blamed for this. You've never been to Kunwu, so you naturally don't know the situation here. Besides, you don't have anything to conceal your physique. If you were targeted by high-level cultivators, you'd be easily seen through." "Concealment physique?" Tang Shen's eyes lit up. "Elder Yi, is there really something that can conceal one's constitution?" "Of course." Mo Chenga muttered to herself for a moment. She remembered Shui Linbo once said she learned many of her techniques from the Bichuan court female cultivator who saved her. Among them, there was a set of cultivation techniques that could conceal one's physical condition. She also relied on that set of cultivation techniques to deceive Wanderer Baiyu, so why didn't Tang Shen know about it? The founder of the sect, Primordial Lady Bishui, had a pure Yin constitution. She should have passed down such a technique. Why don't you know about it? Tang Shen hung his head dejectedly. "Elder Yi, we also don't know the exact place where the founder passed away. What was left in Bichuan court was only a part of the founder's collection, and many of the cultivation techniques passed down were incomplete. Among them, there was indeed a set of cultivation techniques that could deceive the divine senses of high-level cultivators, but only female cultivators could practice it." "Oh, I see." Mo Chenga nodded. This wasn't strange. After all, Mo Yaoqing passed away more than 5,000 years ago, so it was impossible for everything to be passed down. Moreover, she was a female cultivator, so it was naturally more suitable for her to practice female cultivators' cultivation techniques. However, presumably, even if it was passed down, it wouldn't be as good as her spirit-concealing pendant. Mo Yaoqing was always worried about her constitution back then, which showed that the cultivation technique she used to conceal her constitution wasn't very effective. Mo Chenga thought for a moment, then said, although physique-concealing cultivation techniques are rare, they're not impossible to obtain. A set of brilliant breath-concealing technique is enough. It might not necessarily be able to deceive high-level cultivators, but it's better than not using it. Quanzhong City is a trade city, so we can look for it in the trade fairs here. Upon hearing this, hope ignited in Tang Xin's eyes, but he was a bit hesitant. Elder Yi, do you need a lot of spirit stones? My Qingquan bag was taken away when I was captured. Although Senior Jing later returned my Qingquan bag to me, there weren't many spirit stones left inside. His words made Mo Chenga laugh. Since I'm Bishuan Court's guest elder, I naturally can't ignore you when you're in trouble. I'll pay you the spirit stones first. You can give them to me later if you have a chance. And Tang Xin didn't refuse. Right now, he really needed a way to conceal his constitution. By the way, Mo Chenga asked, how's Bishuan Court doing? Speaking of this, Tang Xin was a bit excited. Ever since we discovered the spirit stone mine in the sea and started accepting male cultivators, our group's strength has been recovering very quickly. It's just that we don't have any core formation cultivators for the time being. However, as long as we can buy core formation medicinal pills, we'll have core formation elders in a few dozen years. At this point, the light in his eyes dimmed. I can only blame myself for not handling things well. I've been missing for more than 10 years, so I don't know what the situation in the group is like. You've been missing for so long, I'm afraid they've already sent people to look for you, Mo Chenga said. Bishuan Court should have a branch in Kunwu, right? Tang Xin said, it's only a small hall with about a dozen people, and the highest cultivation level among them is only in the early stage of the foundation building realm. In that case, contact them first and tell them you're fine. We'll stay in Quanzhong City for a few days and give you a breath-concealing technique. We'll also see if there are any core formation medicinal pills. Tang Xin's eyes widened. Without spirit stones, he was too embarrassed to bring up his original request. After all, core formation medicinal pills were extremely expensive, but he didn't expect Mo Chenga to bring it up herself. Feeling excited, he nodded and said cautiously, Elder Yi, after I go back, I'll report this matter to the sect head. After a while, I'll return the spirit stones along with the offerings you've received all these years. Mo Chenga nodded. At that time, you can directly send them to Shanqing School. If I'm not there, you can leave them for my husband. Upon hearing this, Tang Xin was taken aback. Elder Yi, you're dual cultivating? Mo Chenga nodded with a smile and said, I've formed my gold core now. My Taoist name is Qingwei and my husband's Taoist name is Shoujing. If you need anything, you can just look for them. Upon hearing this, Tang Xin couldn't describe the feeling in his heart. He only felt a sense of loss. To be honest, he couldn't say he loved Mo Chenga. However, people with pure yang and pure yin constitutions only appeared once every several thousand years. Even if they appeared, they might not necessarily meet again. Coincidentally, the two of them were born at the same time and their ages weren't too different. Although Mo Chenga once refused him, he still held a faint hope in his heart. He felt that since they had pure yang and pure yin constitutions, they ought to be fated. But now, Mo Chenga said she was performing dual cultivation, so the two of them really weren't fated. Congratulations. After a long time, Tang Xin finally said these two words. Mo Chenga just smiled, then stood up and said, Fellow Taoist Tang, you should rest here. If I need anything, I'll come looking for you. Tang Xin answered, then called out to her, Elder Yi, you're a core formation senior now, so I can't be called fellow Taoist anymore. Please call me by my name. Mo Chenga paused for a moment, then smiled. Alright, see you tomorrow. See you. Mo Chenga didn't think too much about Tang Xin's thoughts. Everyone had their own thoughts. If it didn't harm her, she didn't need to care too much about it. The night passed. Mo Chenga didn't immediately go to the trade fair. Instead, she ordered the steward of the branch to inquire about the breath-concealing technique. Shanqing School's branches outside the school belonged to the steward's hall. As an elder, she could naturally order the steward's hall to help her with matters. The steward of the branch also had some connections in Quanzhong City. After Mo Chenga gave him the order, he came back with some news in just 2 days. After confirming that the breath-concealing technique was indeed a high-grade cultivation technique, Mo Chenga bought it and gave it to Tang Shen. Several days later, Tang Shen received a reply from the news he sent back to the guild. As it turned out, after Tang Shen disappeared, they also searched for a long time, but they really couldn't find him, so they could only follow the sect head's instructions to look for Mo Chenga. In the end, Mo Chenga happened to disappear on Demonic Mountain 10 years ago. When they heard this news from Shenqing School, they thought Mo Chenga also died on Demonic Mountain like those people, so they could only return in disappointment. Tang Shen finally learned about this matter. He was surprised. So Elder Yi also went to Demonic Mountain? Ever since he was caught, he hadn't heard any news from the outside world. Mo Chenga smiled. And when the restrictions on Demonic Mountain collapsed, I was trapped inside for 10 years. Tang Shen said regretfully, if we met on Demonic Mountain that year, maybe we wouldn't have to go through so much trouble. They indeed passed each other by each other. However, Mo Chenga didn't know that when she and Qin Shi were separated, Qin Shi met Tang Shen, and Tang Shen also didn't know he had a chance encounter with Elder Ye's husband. Bishuan Court's guild also brought Wei Haolan's instructions. After they received Tang Shen's news, they reported it to Wei Haolan. Wei Haolan was overjoyed to learn that Tang Shen and Mo Chenga were still alive, so she sent a message asking Mo Chenga to bring Tang Shen back. Mo Chenga thought about it carefully. Even if she obtained the breath-concealing technique, Tang Shen had just learned it, so he might encounter some unforeseen events along the way. Since she saved Tang Shen, she might as well be a good person and send him back to Linhai, so she agreed. For this reason, she asked the steward of this branch to send a message back to inform Qin Shi and her master. Her current cultivation level was already in the peak of the early stage of the core formation realm, so it was time for her to go outside. Since she had to go to Linhai, she might as well travel around. In any case, Qin Shi's closed-door meditation would take at least 10 or 20 years. In addition, Tang Shen's words reminded her of one thing. They didn't know the specific place where Mo Yaoqing passed away, but she obtained the art of Sunu because Mo Yaoqing sealed a strand of her divine sense in the Mo clan in the secular world. Was it possible that she passed away in Mo family's village and didn't leave her divine sense in Mo family's village and only passed away after returning to Linhai? With this thought in mind, Mo Chenga had an idea. She hadn't returned to Mo family's village since she left, so she might as well go to Mo family's village to look for clues about Mo Yaoqing. She couldn't solve the problem of the cultivation technique conflict caused by her pure Yin constitution and spiritual roots of the origin, but she had seen Mo Yaoqing's personal notes. Although this ancestor was a woman, she was an amazing genius. Maybe she left something behind that could give her some pointers. Once she made up her mind, Mo Chenga quickly made a decision. She'd let Tang Shen stay in Kuanzhong City first while she returned to the secular world. If she could find some clues, then she'd leave. If she couldn't, she'd go to Linhai to look. Chapter 326. Wearing her cloud-treading boots, she looked down at the town below. It was a very small town, with only a few streets and a few stalls scattered along the sides of the streets. There weren't many people coming and going. Most of them were farmers and commoners. She glanced at them one by one, looking for familiar traces. The inn, the noodle stall, the tall flag with the word tea on the side of the bridge at the town entrance. It was as if time had passed and she had returned to 90 years ago. She followed the path out of the town and soon arrived at a small village. On the east side of the village, there were a few houses scattered sporadically with a winding river and smoke curling up from chimneys. This was only a small village under Lianqing in Jin country. There were only 300 or 400 people in the village, which was very ordinary in the secular world. But this place had a different meaning for her. This was her hometown. She was born and grew up here. Under her mother's care, she also had a happy childhood. 90 years passed like water, unable to stop the passing of time. The little girl from back then was now a core formation cultivator, while the people from back then had become a pile of bones and a pile of yellow soil. She saw a house with a small courtyard in the east side of the village. It was newly painted, its roof tiles were bright, and there was a woman sweeping the courtyard. She naturally didn't know who she was. Her mother passed away and she also left. This house must have been given to an uncle, right? The house was still the same house, but she could no longer find the home in her memory. She sighed softly and closed her eyes. Immortals and mortals were different. She would no longer be entangled in the past, but seeing the traces of her childhood still couldn't hide the faint sadness in her heart. The ancestral hall still stood in the west of the village. Although there were traces of renovation, the walls were still a lot old. She took a step forward and couldn't help but want to see if there was still a stern old man there. There was a small and narrow room for the library. In that small book room, she learned about such a world of cultivation for the first time and walked on such a path. Seeing her entering the village, many villagers ran out of their houses and pointed at her, but they didn't have the courage to come forward. Her Taoist robe was spotless, her appearance was picturesque, and her temperament was elegant. She was like a fairy who descended to the world, completely different from the villagers. She walked along the small path in the village. After 90 years, the thin and weak little girl who was no different from the villagers had become a magnificent core formation cultivator. She pushed open the door of the ancestral hall. This time, someone finally ran over in a panic, wanting to stop her. "Miss, this is our Mo family's ancestral hall. Women aren't allowed to enter." Faced with her, he couldn't even speak smoothly. In the end, he just mumbled. "I just came back for a visit," she said softly, stepping over the threshold of the lobby. Women were not allowed to enter this hall. She had only entered it once, but it had changed her life. Under the invisible spiritual pressure of a core formation cultivator, the person who stopped her didn't dare to step forward. He could only watch as she walked forward, stood in front of the ancestral tablets, and reached out her hand to touch one of the tablets. Although women were not allowed to enter the ancestral hall, her mother had found a son-in-law, and her memorial tablet was still enshrined in the ancestral hall after her death. At that time, she hadn't confirmed her father's death yet, so there was only her mother's memorial tablet. All these years, no one had paid their respects to her. "Mother, don't you feel very lonely being here alone? I'll take you away and bury you with me, okay?" Mo Chenga smiled, waved her sleeve, and the dust on the memorial tablet was swept away. She then put the tablet into her chinkuan bag. "Miss?" That person turned pale with fright. No need to panic." She turned her head and smiled at the person. "I'm a descendant of the Mo family. This is my mother's spirit. Today I came to collect it." Hearing those words, the man was startled. He was speechless. He was a little old man in his 50s or 60s. He thought he had seen all the children in the village, but the woman in front of him was a complete stranger. This fairy-like girl was a descendant of the Mo family? Mo Chinga turned her head and looked at the highest position. Mo Yaoqing's tablet. There were only these 5 words on the Jade tablet. There was no title. However, perhaps none of the descendants knew that their ancestor wasn't immortal, right? She didn't know what mysteries were written on this tablet. She muttered to herself for a moment, then gently raised her hand. The Jade tablet flew into her hand out of thin air. Upon seeing this, the little old man who stopped her turned pale with fright. "Miss, are you an immortal?" Mo Chinga paused and looked sideways. "How did you know?" The little old man looked at the position where she took the tablet and was suddenly shocked. You're. Mo Chinga wrinkled her brows. "You know who I am?" The little old man took a deep breath, then suddenly knelt down and kowtowed. Mo Ija greets second grandaunt. Second grandaunt? This title made Mo Chinga fall into a trance for a moment. She thought about it carefully and realized that among the girls of her generation in the village, she was indeed ranked second. Tianxiao was the eldest granddaughter and she was the second granddaughter. She smiled. "It's been 90 years. I didn't expect someone would remember me." The little old man looked up at her with awe and said, "Everyone in the village knows that second grandaunt was taken away by an immortal. Second grandaunt, please wait here for a moment. I'll go invite eldest uncle." "Eldest uncle?" Before Mo Chenga could ask, the little old man already stood up while trembling and hurriedly ran out of the room. According to the little old man's title, she should be 2 generations older than him, and eldest uncle was also 2 generations older than him. Could it be that there were still living members of the Mo family in her generation? Mo Chenga felt it was a bit unbelievable, but she would know the answer in a moment. She smiled, then looked down at Mo Yaoqing's tablet. This tablet was made of jade, and it was jade with spiritual aura. When she left the Mo family's village, she was still young, so she didn't know what to make of it. She also didn't feel that there was a small restriction here. This restriction was very delicate. If she wasn't very proficient in formations and had read Mo Yaoqing's notes, it would have been very difficult for her to see through it even with her current cultivation level. She would have just treated it as an ordinary piece of jade with spiritual aura. Mo Chinga smiled, gathered spiritual aura between her fingers, and inserted it into the jade tablet. The hard jade tablet was like mist. Mo Chinga took out a jade slip from it, and the jade tablet was intact. After taking out the jade slip, most of the spiritual aura on the tablet had dissipated. Mo Chinga raised her hand, put Mo Yaoqing's tablet back to its original place, and put the jade slip into her Qingkuan bag. More and more people gathered at the entrance of the ancestral hall. It was the first time these villagers saw a woman enter the ancestral hall. Moijia, who was guarding the ancestral hall, not only didn't stop her, but he even kowtowed to her. They surrounded the ancestral hall's entrance, pointing at Mo Tienga and whispering, trying to guess her identity, but none of them dared to enter. Great-grandfather. Great-grandfather is here. A commotion arose in the crowd. Eldest uncle. Moijia's excited voice rang out. Here. Second grandaunt is here. The crowd was pushed aside, and a trembling old man with wrinkled skin and white hair, so old that he could barely walk, was supported inside. Seeing him walking over, everyone respectfully retreated. The old man raised his head and stared at Mo Tienga for a long time with his cloudy eyes. He looked shocked and walked towards her while trembling. Tienga. Are you Tienga? She couldn't find any trace of him in her memory, but the old man in front of her overlapped with the grandfather in her mind. Mo Tienga stared at the dying old man in front of her and said softly, Are you Tianjun? The old man's cloudy tears fell down. You're finally back. Mo Tienga took a deep breath. Tianjun should be 2 years older than me, right? She was 98 years old now, so Tianjun should be 100 years old. He was actually still alive. Tianjun, are you okay? Staring at the old man in front of her who couldn't even walk, Mo Tienga let out a sigh. This time, when she returned to the secular world, she really didn't expect to run into an acquaintance. She thought after 90 years the world had already changed. Very good. I lived to 100 years old. Very good, very good. Mo Tianjun trembled and wiped his tears. When people get old, they become easily excited. At that time, when they were still children, he always liked to bully his younger sister and pull her braids. Later, when he grew up a bit, he realized he should also show more care to this younger sister. But not long after, she left and never came back. Now he was old and had one foot in the coffin, but she finally came back, but she was still young. He wiped his tears and suddenly remembered something. He said, Right, Tianxiao. Tianxiao also went to your world. Do you know? Mo Tienga's eyes dimmed. Tianxiao's death was the regret of her life. I met her. She said softly, but she's already passed away. Really? Mo Tianjun sighed, but he didn't feel very sad. He had lived for a long time and had seen many deaths. He was used to the death of his loved ones. Not to mention his parents and brothers, even his own children had passed away and his grandchildren had begun to grow old. He didn't know why he had lived for so long. Tianxiao isn't an immortal. I've long guessed she's probably already passed away, Mo Tienga didn't explain. It was good to let him think that way. He was already so old and had long been mentally prepared, so why should she make him sad again? Tienga, you're already an immortal, aren't you? Mo Tienga smiled. Yes. I'm successful in my cultivation now and have the ability of an immortal. Before Mo Tianjun could say anything, the young man who had been supporting him suddenly knelt down. Great-grandaunt, since you're already an immortal, please save great-grandfather. Great-grandfather, Before the young man could finish his words, Mo Tienga raised her hand and stopped him. You don't need to say anything. Your great-grandfather is immortal. God is already merciful for him to live to 100 years old. I can make his body healthy, but I can't change his cycle of life and death. Great-grandaunt, Mo Tianjun shouted. Although he was old and his voice was hoarse, he still had prestige, so the young man didn't dare to say anything else. Mo Tianjun looked at Mo Tienga and said, People have to live, grow old, get sick and die. I'm already satisfied that I've lived for so long, but these descendants of the Mo family, Tienga, I know you cultivators need spiritual roots. Only with spiritual roots can you have fated chances to cultivate. Today I'll be thick-skinned and beg you. If the descendants of the Mo family have this kind of spiritual root, please give them some fated chances. Mo Tianjun was already tired after speaking for such a long time. The young man hastily stood up and supported him. Mo Tienga glanced at the young man and smiled. All right, I'm also a descendant of the Mo family. It's only a slight effort, so it's only natural. But whether they have a fated chance to become an immortal or not isn't something I can decide. Within today, all the descendants of the Mo family can come here to try whether they have a fated chance to become an immortal or not. If they do, I'll take them on the path to immortality. If they don't, then forget about it. Chapter 327. Facing Mo Tianjuan's eager gaze, Mo Tienga sighed softly and shook her head. After half a day of testing, None of the more than 400 people in Mo family's village had spiritual roots, including newborn babies and dying old men. This was very normal. Among mortals, it was hard to find 1 in 10,000 who possessed spiritual roots, even if the Mo family's ancestor was a cultivator. Mo Yaoqing and Zhong Muling, the children of 2 nascent soul cultivators, also didn't have spiritual roots. Moreover, after so many generations, the hereditary factors had long been diluted by other blood relations. There was probably only one person like her who possessed both a pure Yin constitution and a spiritual root, in these few thousand years. Mo Qianjuan's face was full of disappointment as he muttered, "In the end, I still don't have any." Mo Qianga comforted him. "Spiritual roots are 1 in a million, so it's normal not to have any. Even if you have spiritual roots, if your aptitude is poor, it'll be even more difficult to set foot on the path to immortality. It'd be better to live happily in the secular world." But how could Mo Tianjun feel relieved by this kind of comfort? Ever since Mo Qianga was taken away by immortals and his younger sister left with her brother-in-law, a cultivator, he had been yearning for that world. He couldn't do it himself, but his descendants were also good. Mo Qianga pondered for a while, then took out a 5 elements plate from her Chengkuan bag and put it on the altar in the ancestral hall. She then separated a bit of her divine sense and cast a spell on it. "I was able to walk on the path to immortality because of the kindness left by my ancestors. Today I'll also leave this thing here. Any descendant of Mo family, male or female, can come here to have their spiritual roots tested. If someone has spiritual roots, even if they're thousands of miles away, I'll still be able to sense them and come to pick them up." Mo Tianjun was delighted to hear this. "Qianga, thank you." Mo Qianga smiled. "I'm also a descendant of Mo family. Why do you need to thank me?" She paused for a moment, then mentioned another purpose. "Tianjun, I came back because I want to move my mother's grave." Mo Tianjun was startled. What? "I found my father's remains and want to bury them together." Mo Tianjun said, "Isn't it the same to bury them here?" Mo Qianga sighed and said, "Immortals and mortals are different. After I leave this time, I probably won't set foot on the secular world again, so I want them to be closer to me." Mo Tianjun was speechless. He had lived for 100 years and had seen a few cultivators. He had learned some things about the immortal cultivation world from them. He knew that for cultivators, relatives and clans weren't that important. What united them was not only their bloodline, but also their interests. Among them, there were very few people like Tiangu who came back especially for the sake of their parents' graves. Now that Qianga wanted to move his mother's remains out of the ancestral grave, he had no reason to stop her. All these years, the 4th aunt's grave had been left unattended. Only when he thought of it occasionally would he ask his grandchildren to clear the weeds. "That is fine." After a long time he nodded solemnly. 4th uncle isn't immortal. 4th aunt has suffered all her life, so it's a good thing that she can be buried with him. Besides, you are a family. If you want to move, I have no reason to stop you. The day passed very quickly. In the evening, the young men of Mo clan followed Mo Qianjuan's instructions and handed the urn containing the bones to Mo Qianga. Mo Qianga put away the bones, then stood up. "All right, I should go now." Mo Tianjun stood up shakily. "I'll see you off." Once he saw her off, he was afraid it would be goodbye forever. Mo Qianga gently supported him. A wisp of spiritual aura flowed out of her fingers and poured into Mo Tianjuan's body. Mo Tianjun stiffened, but soon he felt comfortable all over, as if he was dozens of years younger. "This is..." Mo Qianga smiled and said, "Although I'm a cultivator, I can't change the mortal's way of life and death. But with this spiritual aura protecting your body, you'll definitely be healthy and free of disease when you reach the end of your life." Then she glanced around and waved her hand softly. The door of the ancestral hall closed without any wind. She took out a jade box from her robe and handed it to Mo Tianjun. "There's a talisman, a low-grade cultivation technique manual, and some miscellaneous items inside. If someone among the descendants of Mo clan is tested to have spiritual roots and I don't come back, burn this talisman. If there's still no one, it means I've already passed away and my inheritance has been severed. At that time, give the things inside to the person with spiritual roots and let him find his own path to immortality." Mo Tianjun took it excitedly. Okay, I've put a restriction on this jade box. Only descendants of Mo clan can open it. You must take good care of this thing and never leak it. Otherwise you might bring a fatal disaster to yourself. Remember this." Mo Tianjun solemnly agreed and carefully put the thing away. Then Mo Qianga waved goodbye to Mo Tianjun. Under the gazes of the Mo family, A cloud appeared under her feet and she flew into the sky. She took one last look at the small village from the sky, then turned into a flight light and disappeared into the horizon. The villagers of Mo family's village were still staring at the sky in a daze. Immortal. This is an immortal. Father, I also want to become an immortal. You're a girl. How can you become an immortal? Quickly go and light a fire. Why can't I become an immortal? Great-grandaunt is also a girl. Great-grandfather said girls can enter the ancestral hall from now on. Great-grandaunt is great-grandaunt. Do you think anyone can become an immortal? You're still disobedient. Mo Chenga couldn't hear these words. She took out the jade slip from her cloud-treading boots and injected her divine sense into it. A moment later she withdrew her divine sense and smiled slightly. Her premonition was correct. Mo Yaoqing really left a message about her death in Mo family's village. She said in the jade slip that she knew she didn't have much time left in her lifespan, so she returned to Mo family's village to leave an opportunity for the descendants of the Mo family to step onto the path of immortality. She also left this jade slip in the jade tablet to explain her plans. She planned to return to Linhai and make arrangements for her funeral. However, the place she prepared for her death wasn't inside Bishuan Court but a secret place she accidentally found in the past. Aside from her, Bishuan Court had never produced a nascent soul cultivator. Mo Yaoqing was a genius, so she had many powerful magic weapons with her. She was worried that leaving behind so many magic weapons would be a disaster, not a blessing. After thinking for a long time, she decided to leave some of them to pass on to her disciples and leave some of them in the place of her death. She then left clues about her former immortal's cave. Whether it was the descendants of the Mo family or the disciples of Bishuan Court, if they reached the nascent soul realm, they could see through her restrictions and discover the message. Several thousand years had passed, but things were still beyond Mo Yaoqing's expectations. Mo Chenga was only in the core formation realm, but by relying on the powerful divine sense tempered by the soul refining art and her proficiency in formations and restrictions, she discovered this jade slip. What caught Mo Chenga's attention was that this jade slip recorded some things that weren't in her personal notes. For example, Mo Yaoqing mentioned she had a detailed cultivation experience. Not only did it record her understanding of cultivating the art of Sunu for more than 1,000 years, but it also recorded some secret places she'd been to, as well as her own detailed experiences. These were all valuable information, and all of them were stored in the place of her death. This made Mo Chenga extremely excited. Mo Yaoqing's personal notes she obtained before were merely some things she casually recorded, such as the cultivation of spells, the modification of pill recipes, and some immature ideas. She was able to refine the heaven and earth fan and obtain great benefits from them. According to this jade slip, Mo Yaoqing's cultivation experience was carefully organized after she didn't have much time left in her lifespan, so many of the ideas inside were completely mature. The value of this was far greater than that personal note. Besides, the cultivation experience also recorded the methods to enter and exit many secret places she'd been to, so it might come in handy in the future. Mo Chenga didn't think for long before she made a decision. Since she found a clue, she'd go take a look. Since Mo Yaoqing left some clues, there shouldn't be any danger as long as she followed the clues. That being the case, she had to go to Linhai this time. After returning to Kuanzhong City and informing the steward of Shenqing School's branch, Mo Chenga set off with Tang Shen. As for the medicinal pills needed to form her gold core, she pretended that the branch steward had bought them and gave the dustless pills, extreme clear pills, and so on she concocted to Tang Shen. Tang Shen was very happy to find these medicinal pills of excellent quality. He thought Mo Chenga obtained them through some special means, so he was very grateful. Mo Chenga naturally wouldn't expose him and let him think so. With the help of a core formation cultivator, Tang Shen safely reached the vicinity of Mount Yuheng in East Kunwu. Cultivators in the core formation realm and above rarely appeared in the secular world. When he came to Kunwu, Demonic Mountain happened to open, so high-level cultivators emerged one after another. That was why he was so unlucky to run into the hands of a nascent soul cultivator. Mo Chenga also reminded Tang Shen about this. Sometimes he didn't only have to consider himself, but he also had to consider the things happening around him. If he hadn't coincidentally come to Kunwu when Demonic Mountain opened, he wouldn't have been so unlucky. Tang Shen listened obediently. Although he wasn't younger than Mo Chenga, he was far from her in terms of experience and understanding. He was also aware of this. Bishuan Court's guild hall was located near Mount Yuheng. This small guild hall, which only had a dozen or so people, wasn't eye-catching at all on Mount Yuheng. People who didn't know would only think it was a small shop. This shop sold some special products from the Eastern Sea, which was considered special on Mount Yuheng, so its business was quite good. However, Tang Xin told Mo Tiange that the things sold in this small shop were ordinary things. The truly valuable materials were directly sold to the nearby cultivation groups and big clans. For Bishuan Court, this was actually quite a lot of income. Mo Tiange was a bit tempted. The Eastern Sea had one kind of product that Kunwu didn't have: beast cores of demonic beasts in the sea. These beast cores were different from the beast cores of demonic beasts in the southern forest. They could be concocted into some special medicinal pills. It would be a good thing if they could facilitate the beast core transaction between Bishuan Court and Xianqing School. After all, with her there, Xianqing School wouldn't lower the price too much. Other cultivation groups would inevitably use their power to pressure others, so Xianqing School would also have another channel to collect materials. However, this matter couldn't be rushed. Beast cores weren't something that only low-level demonic beasts had. According to the guild hall, Bishuan Court still didn't have a core formation cultivator, so they didn't have the ability to hunt for beast cores of demonic beasts in the sea. After arriving at Bishuan Court's guild hall, the two of them stepped into the transporting formation under the respectful escort of the guild hall steward, heading towards Linhai. Chapter 328. The white light from the transporting formation dissipated, and Mo Tiange looked around. "Elder Yi, we meet again." Wei Haolan stood in front of her with a smile. 40 years had passed, but her cultivation level hadn't changed, and her appearance hadn't changed much either. Wei Haolan was only about 100 years old back then. Even if she couldn't make a realm breakthrough in her lifetime, she still had more than 200 years to live. Judging from her current appearance, she seemed to be living a good life. Mo Tiange also smiled. "Sect Head Wei, it's been many years since we last met. How have you been?" "Thanks to Elder Ye's blessings, I've been very happy these years." The two of them looked at each other and couldn't help but laugh. Wei Haolan watched as the two of them walked out of the transporting formation. She looked at Tang Xin reproachfully. "Junior Marshal Brother Tang, how could you be so careless? You've been missing for so long, we almost thought you died." Tang Xin lowered his head and said apologetically, "Senior Marshal Sister Sect Head, I'm sorry. I overestimated myself and didn't handle things well." Wei Haolan didn't blame him anymore. She just said, "Since you're back and you've contacted Elder Yi, let's forget about this matter. Junior Marshal Brother Tang, you've worked hard these past dozen years. We'll talk about other things later. Go rest first." "Yes." Tang Xin grunted in response. He then reached into his Chengkuan bag and took out the medicine. "Senior Marshal Sister Sect Head, these are medicinal pills for core formation that Elder Yi helped me buy. In addition, Elder Yi also helped me buy a high-grade breath-concealing technique. These spirit stones were paid for by her first." Wei Haolan took them, then thanked Mo Tiange with a smile. "Elder Yi, this time it's all thanks to you." Mo Tiange smiled and waved her hand. "Since I'm Bishuan Court's guest elder and I've accepted your offerings, I should do something for Bishuan Court when I need it." Upon hearing what Wei Haolan said, Wei Haolan no longer thanked her. She said to Tang Xin gently, "Junior Marshal Brother Tang, you don't need to worry. You're working for the school. Since you lost this batch of spirit stones, the school will take care of it for you. Rest assured." Tang Xin felt slightly relieved. In order to buy medicinal pills for core formation, he had brought a huge number of spirit stones with him this time. After losing these spirit stones, he felt very remorseful. Only after he heard Wei Haolan's consolation did he feel a bit better. "Thank you, Senior Marshal Sister Sect Head. I'll take my leave first." "Yes." As Wei Haolan and Mo Tiange watched Tang Xin leave through the tunnel with his head lowered, Wei Haolan and Mo Tiange looked at each other and smiled. Wei Haolan made an inviting gesture, then started walking together with Mo Tiange. As they walked, she said, "In fact, I originally didn't agree to let Junior Marshal Brother Tang go, but Junior Marshal Brother Tang always yearned to go to Kunwu. Seeing that he's become more and more mature in handling matters these past few years, I took the risk and let him go. I didn't expect something would still go wrong." Mo Tiange smiled faintly and said, "This matter can't be blamed on him. It's just that the timing he went to Kunwu wasn't right." "I know." Wei Haolan sighed. "Otherwise I wouldn't have said nothing. Junior Marshal Brother Tang has been a lot more careful these past few years, but his constitution is still a disaster. If he goes out, it's hard to guarantee that he won't have an accident." Mo Tiange smiled faintly. "This problem can't be solved unless he forms his gold core one day and successfully cultivates the breath-concealing technique. It's easier said than done. Wei Haolan rubbed the space between her eyebrows. Junior Marshal Brother Tang's cultivation has been going smoothly these past few years, but he's still a fine line away from the late stage of the foundation building realm. He's never been able to make a breakthrough. This kind of thing can't be rushed. Emo Chenga comforted her. Some people have an epiphany in one day while some people stay where they are for dozens of years. Breaking through realms depends on personal experience. Wei Haolan smiled. Since Elder Yi has returned, I have to ask you to give me some advice. Emo Chenga only smiled. I can only give some advice about realm breakthroughs. I can't give too many pointers. After all, everyone's situation is different. And I understand what Elder Yi said. After walking for a while, Wei Haolan suddenly turned to look at Emo Chenga and said with a smile, "Look at my memory. I actually forgot such an important thing. Elder Yi, I still haven't congratulated you for advancing to the core formation realm. You're not even 100 years old, but you're already a core formation cultivator. You can be considered a rare genius in 1,000 years." Emo Chenga had heard a lot about geniuses in Kunwu. She smiled and shook her head. Sect Head Wei, don't praise me. Not to mention rare geniuses in 1,000 years, Xianqing School alone has produced 3 cultivators who advanced to the core formation realm before 100 years old. I really can't accept this. Oh right. Wei Haolan nodded, looking at her with endless envy. It's really because Xianqing School has produced geniuses one after another in the past several hundred years. Emo Chenga just smiled, but she was actually very proud of herself. Xianqing School had indeed produced many outstanding cultivators in the past several hundred years. Other cultivation groups would be considered good if they had 1 or 2 in 1,000 years. Wei Haolan's gaze shifted, then she said, "This is only one of the reasons." Not long ago, the manager of Mount Yuheng's guild hall reported that Elder Yi already performed dual cultivation, and your husband is Xianqing School's new nascent soul cultivator, Lord Daoist Shoujing. I really have to congratulate Elder Yi. Emo Chenga smiled. Thank you. Sect Headway's news is really fast. Wei Haolan shook her head and said, Elder Ye's dual cultivation was 2 years ago, but I only learned about it recently. Our Bichuan Court's guild hall in Kunwu is still not doing enough. This isn't a secret, so we should have reported it earlier. What she said was related to Bichuan Court's specific affairs. Emo Chenga was only a nominal guest elder, so she just smiled and didn't say much. The two of them quickly left through the tunnel and arrived at the conference hall. Wei Haolan invited Emo Chenga to sit down, then asked a disciple to serve tea. She then brought up another matter. Elder Yi, although I asked Elder Yi to send Junior Marshal Brother Tang back, there's no need for you to be transported here together. Presumably, Elder Yi doesn't lack spirit stones and is in a hurry to come and get them, right? Emo Chenga smiled. In any case, I'm Bichuan Court's guest elder. We haven't seen each other for many years, so isn't it good for me to come and take a look? Of course it's good to come and take a look, but my intuition has always been very accurate. Faced with Wei Haolan's faint smile, Emo Chenga could only sigh. Alright, I do have some matters, Wei Haolan then asked. Do you need help with anything? Not at the moment. Emo Chenga pondered in her heart. This matter was still unclear, so she didn't want to talk about it in detail. After all, this matter was a bit difficult, and Bichuan Court didn't even have a core formation cultivator now. Wei Haolan was a smart person, so she didn't pursue the matter. She just said, if there's anything you need help with, Elder Yi, please don't hesitate to ask. Thank you. Emo Chenga then asked about Bichuan Court's situation in the past several decades, and Wei Haolan answered her questions one by one. Back then, after Bichuan Court was almost exterminated, an opportunity arrived. The discovery of the Spirit Stone vein in the Eastern Sea and the change in the group's rules allowed Bichuan Court's strength to recover rapidly. In the past several decades, the number of aura refining and foundation building disciples they had already surpassed their original number. The only thing they lacked now were core formation cultivators. Emo Chenga then asked, Elder Tang still in the middle stage of the foundation building realm. Are there already cultivators in the group who can advance to the core formation realm so quickly? Back then, Tang Shen was chosen as a temporary elder because his ability in fights of magical powers had greatly improved. In terms of cultivation level, the middle stage of the foundation building realm wasn't bad either. Wei Haolan sighed. How can it be that fast? Right now, there's a senior martial sister and a senior martial brother in the group who've reached the late stage of the foundation building realm, but they haven't reached the peak stage yet. I'm just taking precautions. After all, core formation medicinal pills aren't easy to find. They might not be found even after several decades. Emo Chinga nodded silently. Back then Shengguan Yunhao was a good example. If it weren't for the fact that he couldn't find core formation medicinal pills for so long and thus had no hope of advancing to the core formation realm, he wouldn't have entered a demonic barrier so easily and betrayed the group. This time, if it weren't for Elder Yi, we wouldn't have been able to get these core formation medicinal pills, so I still have to express my gratitude to Elder Yi. Emo Chinga smiled and waved her hand. Sect Head Wei, I really can't accept your thanks over and over again. Wei Haolan was startled, but she soon smiled again. Alright, I won't say thank you words in the future. It's fine to just keep them in my heart. After chatting for a while, Wei Haolan saw that Emo Chinga had nothing else to say, so she tactfully stopped talking and asked someone to take Emo Chinga to rest. After leaving Bishuan Court's conference hall, Emo Chinga strolled around. Traces of the destruction caused by Ren Yufeng back then had already disappeared. Those pavilions, terraces and buildings had all been renovated, and the monastery gate had also been rebuilt and was constantly decorated with flowers and plants. The female cultivator's skillful hands made Bishuan Court look even more beautiful and pleasant than those big cultivation groups in Kunwu. Along the way, many aura-refining disciples came and went. There were both male and female cultivators. When they saw her, all of them widened their eyes in astonishment. This was because her clothes were different from theirs, but it was also because of her cultivation level. A core formation cultivator. She's actually a core formation cultivator. The aura-refining disciple who led the way for her had a proud look on his face as he announced to these people, "This is our guest elder, Elder Yi." Thus, along the way, countless disciples saluted her. Greetings to Elder Yi. Emo Chinga felt very helpless. She never liked this kind of ostentatious display. Fortunately, the place she wanted to go wasn't far, so she soon arrived at the VIP building. Originally, Wei Haolan wanted to let her stay in the Dao Achieving Pagoda, but Emo Chinga refused. The Dao Achieving Pagoda was, after all, the symbol of Bishuan Court, and she wasn't a real elder of Bishuan Court. She only returned to Linhai to look for the cultivation experience Emo Yaoqing left behind. Just now, Wei Haolan already gave her the spirit stones needed to buy cultivation techniques and medicinal pills. She also gave her more than 10,000 spirit stones, saying she was a guest elder's sacrifice. In fact, she obtained a lot from Bishuan Court, so she really didn't want to take advantage of them. Emo Chinga stayed in the VIP building for several days. During her stay, Wei Haolan invited her to meet Bishuan Court's foundation building cultivators. Although female cultivators were still dominant, Bishuan Court had quite a few foundation building male cultivators in recent years. Seeing how young she was, the newly advanced foundation building cultivators were extremely astonished. It wasn't easy for a core formation cultivator to come to Bishuan Court, so Emo Chinga had to pass on some cultivation experience to these foundation building cultivators. In addition, she also accepted Wei Haolan's invitation to teach several cultivators who had hopes of advancing to the core formation realm. By the time everything was done, 7 or 8 days had already passed. Emo Chinga wasn't in a hurry. Although Emo Yaoqing's Jade slip recorded the route, she still had to slowly comprehend it. She could take advantage of this time to ask Wei Haolan some things about the sea. Although she was already in the core formation realm and her cultivation level was much higher than Wei Haolan's, she had no experience going to the sea except for that one time in the northernmost sea 60 years ago. Furthermore, that time wasn't accurate. The situation in the northernmost sea was very different from that in the eastern sea. When Wei Haolan heard Emo Chinga wanted to go to the sea, she didn't ask much. She just told Emo Chinga in detail about the general things she had to pay attention to when going to the sea, as well as the relatively dangerous sea beasts in the vicinity. However, because of her cultivation level, these things could only be used as references. After all, Wei Haolan also hadn't been to the deeper parts of the sea. Emo Yaoqing's Immortal's Cave, on the other hand, was in the depths of the eastern sea. Several days passed. When Emo Chinga finished preparing everything, she finally set out. Chapter 329. Elder Yi, the southeast is where our spirit stone vein is. The sea in this area is safe and doesn't have any dangerous sea beasts. In addition, this is a sea map passed down by the sect's founders. It records the distribution of sea beasts, but because of our limited cultivation levels, we haven't been to many places, so it might not necessarily be trustworthy. Emo Chinga took the sea map from Wei Haolan and said sincerely, "Thank you. With this sea map, my trip will be much safer." Emo Chinga smiled and waved her hand. "Elder Yi, you're our Bishuan Court's guest elder and we're indebted to you, so this kind of trivial matter is something we should do. Mo Chenga also understood Bichuan Court's current situation. They had spirit stones and disciples, but what they lacked was some ways to obtain scarce resources and guidance from high-level cultivators. Therefore, a guest elder like her was very important to Bichuan Court. Wei Haolan would definitely do her best to satisfy Mo Chenga's request and ask her to help Bichuan Court. Wei Haolan didn't only agree to Mo Chenga's request only because they went through trials and tribulations together several decades ago and because the sect founder was her ancestor. After all, Wei Haolan had an extraordinary status in Shenqing school. It would be much easier to get some medicinal pills or even core formation cultivation techniques if they could form a relationship with her. Moreover, Wei Haolan's cultivation level was high and her future was promising. If she formed her nascent soul in the future, Bichuan Court would benefit greatly as long as she occasionally looked after them. Nevertheless, Mo Chenga didn't care about Wei Haolan's plan. In any case, who could truly be good to someone without selfish motives in the cultivation world? It was enough as long as Wei Haolan didn't have any bad intentions. Besides, Wei Haolan and Bichuan Court had that kind of relationship, so she was much more reliable than strangers. As Mo Chenga put away the sea map, she suddenly remembered something and said, "Sect Head Wei, there's something I want to ask you." "Please speak, Elder Yi." Mo Chenga said, "There's a fishing village near Linhai town, and there's a fisherman named Shui San. When I came to Linhai 60 years ago, I had a fated encounter with his family. He had a daughter who was tested to have 5 spiritual roots, so she should be 68 years old now. When Linhai was in chaos, I don't know how they were doing. Please help me ask around." Upon hearing this was such a trivial matter, Wei Haolan readily agreed. "Rest assured, Elder Yi. It's just a trivial matter. Thank you in advance." Mo Chenga then raised her head and gazed at the eastern sea. As far as the eye could see, the sea was boundless. The sea breeze blew gently, and the ripples were clear and crystalline. When the wind was gentle and the sun was bright, the sea was so calm and beautiful. However, when it was angry, the waves were turbulent. In the face of its fury, humans, even cultivators, would find it difficult to calmly face it. Only those who reached the nascent soul stage and had the ability to move mountains and drain oceans would be able to face the fury of the ocean without fear. Mo Chenga speculated that since Mo Yaoqing set up her immortal's cave in the depths of the eastern sea, there was bound to be danger there. Although they had a map of the route she left behind, there were bound to be high-level sea beasts lurking in the depths of the sea. Perhaps it was because of this consideration that they had set up such a complicated restriction. However, she was not afraid. First of all, her natal magic weapon, the Heaven and Earth Fan, had reached the advanced level. This treasure's lethality wasn't very high, but its defensive and trapping abilities were top-notch. Coupled with her cloud-treading boots, white silk handkerchief and virtual sky world, she had a lot of life-saving means that ordinary core formation cultivators simply couldn't compare to. As long as she wasn't too unlucky, her life wouldn't be in danger. "Sect Head Wei, I'll take my leave first." Wei Haolan cupped her hands. "Elder Yi, come back soon." This time Wei Haolan was much more polite. Although the two of them were still as close as before, it was inevitable that there was some respect in her tone. Mo Chenga smiled. Clouds formed under her feet and she soared into the sky, turning into a flight light that swept towards the depths of the sea. After advancing to the core formation realm, a top-grade magic weapon like the cloud-treading boots could truly display its power. When she was building her foundation, although she could also fly while wearing the cloud-treading boots, her speed wasn't as fast as now. After she advanced to the core formation realm, when she used the cloud-treading boots, clouds would form under her feet and these clouds would carry her to fly, saving her a lot of spiritual power. A core formation cultivator's speed was extremely fast. In just half a day, she had already passed the location of the spirit stone vein Wei Haolan mentioned. If she flew further into the depths of the eastern sea, she didn't know what she would encounter. Mo Chenga pondered for a moment. She decided to fly a bit higher to avoid disturbing the powerful sea beasts, but she couldn't fly any higher because she still had to look at the surface of the sea to find the marks Mo Yaoqing left behind. More than 5,000 years had passed. Mo Chenga wasn't sure whether the marks Mo Yaoqing left behind were still effective or not. However, with Mo Yaoqing's intelligence, she should have thought of this problem. With this thought in mind, Mo Chenga threw these doubts to the back of her mind and flew at full speed. This flight lasted for 5 days. During these 5 days, Mo Chenga changed from only seeing small sea beasts of the first and second rank at first to now, she often saw the appearance of fourth and fifth rank sea beasts. She was very cautious along the way. If she attracted the attention of these sea beasts, she would fly a bit higher to hide. On the sixth day, Mo Tienga finally found an island full of spiritual aura on the sea. This island was extremely small, only about 500 square meters in circumference. Maybe this island would be swallowed by a high tide. The spirit veins weren't very good either. The spiritual aura was faint, and it was only a very small spirit vein. Mo Tienga was very pleasantly surprised because there was a record of this island in Mo Yaoqing's Jade slip. However, Mo Yaoqing said it was a bit bigger. After all, 5,000 years had passed, so it was normal for the area of the island to change. In the sea, this kind of island could disappear overnight. Mo Tienga flew around the island in the air but didn't find any traces of high-rank sea beasts in the surroundings. She then carefully landed on the island. She didn't know how long it had been since people came to this island. It was densely covered with vine-like plants, almost covering the whole area except for the beach. Upon seeing this, Mo Tienga carefully released Xiaohua from her spiritual beast pouch. Mo Yaoqing's Jade slip said these vines were very strange. They seemed to be alive, and as long as there was a living thing, they would entangle and swallow it. In this world, beasts had always been herbivores. Herbivores like these violated common sense. Abnormalities were monsters, so these vines could also be said to be a kind of demonic grass. Because of this, there were very few sea beasts near this island. If those low-rank sea beasts accidentally came here, they would be swallowed by these vines. However, these vines were not without natural enemies. If it was a rank 5 demonic beast or above, it would be able to fight against them. Moreover, some sea beasts like to eat these vines because these vines often ate demonic beasts and contained more spiritual qi than ordinary spirit grasses. Swallowing these vines would also be beneficial to one's cultivation. The reason why Mo Yaoqing recorded these islands in the Jade slip was because there was still a long way to go. The sea wasn't like land. You could stop and rest when you were tired of flying. It was normal to not see land for several days or even dozens of days. Therefore, if someone wanted to find her immortal's cave, they would need to rest on this island. Although flying consumed very little spiritual aura, if one couldn't rest, even if one's spiritual aura was replenished by spirit recovering pills, the mental fatigue would be unbearable. Once one's mental state was bad, one's reaction to danger would be slow, and their strength would drop a lot. Therefore, Mo Yaoqing recorded the locations of many islands that could provide temporary rest on the Jade slip. Mo Tienga had the virtual sky world, so this problem originally didn't exist. The reason why she looked for these islands was firstly to use as a reference, and secondly because Mo Yaoqing remembered the characteristics of these vines. She was interested and wanted to collect some. After all, this was the eastern sea where few people lived. Bichuan court cultivators' levels were still low, so they couldn't come here. These vines were also rare, so collecting some might be useful in the future. As soon as Xiaohua came out of the spiritual beast bag, it rushed towards the island with great joy. Maybe it was because it hadn't come out of the spiritual beast bag for a long time. Upon seeing this, Mo Tienga hastily stopped it. "Xiaohua, come back." Xiaohua stopped for a moment, then turned to look at her. It blinked its black eyes, then turned to stare at the green vines, looking like it really wanted to go there. Upon seeing this, a thought emerged in Mo Tienga's mind. Could it be that not only sea beasts, but even a land-based spiritual beast like Xiaohua also instinctively wanted to eat these? Mo Yaoqing didn't say what would happen to spiritual beasts if they ate these vines. She only briefly mentioned the characteristics of these vines in the Jade slip and told them to pay attention to them when resting here. However, since sea beasts like to eat them, it should be the same for spiritual beasts, right? With this thought in mind, Mo Tienga said to Xiaohua, "Xiaohua, use your magic to attack them." Xiaohua and her mind were connected, so after receiving her order, it immediately jumped and spewed out sun-real fire. All spiritual herbs were afraid of things like gold and fire. Even if these vines were demonic herbs, they were no exception. Once Xiaohua's sun-real fire came out, the vines, which were originally as peaceful as ordinary plants, instantly rose to avoid the sun-real fire. Upon seeing this, Xiaohua's eyes widened. It jumped up and shot another sun-real fire at the roots of the vines. This time, even if the vines tried to dodge in panic, they couldn't escape. The roots were immediately burned black, and the branches and leaves softened. "Woo woo!" Xiaohua cried out excitedly. It ran over and bit those branches and leaves, then started to chew them. Mo Tienga saw that it could deal with them easily, so she didn't pay much attention to it. After all, Xiaohua was already in the 5th rank and was a mutated beast. Ordinary demonic beasts couldn't do anything to it, let alone these vines. Since it liked to eat them, she'd let it eat them. With this thought in mind, she took out a flying sword and, relying on her high cultivation level, uprooted some vines. She used her spiritual power to suppress them and sealed them in a jade box. She originally planned to wait for Xiaohua to eat enough before entering the virtual sky world to rest. Who would have thought that this little guy seemed to be addicted to eating and wouldn't leave? Mo Chenga thought about it. There weren't any high-rank sea beasts in the vicinity, so she might as well let it go. She found a place to lay a defensive formation and rest while she was at it, continuing to study Mo Yaoqing's route map. Mo Chenga took out the jade slip and the sea map Wei Haolan gave her, then carefully compared the two. In terms of meticulousness, Mo Yaoqing's map was naturally better. She carefully recorded the route she took that year. She clearly remembered which places had islands to refer to and what kind of demonic beasts there were. However, the sea map Wei Haolan gave her might be more accurate. After all, Mo Yaoqing was a person from 5,000 years ago. 5,000 years had passed and some things had definitely changed. The small island might disappear, but another island might appear, and the demonic beasts might have migrated. According to Mo Yaoqing's notes, if she flew southeast from this small island, there would be a big island. However, according to Wei Haolan's sea map, there was no big island there. Mo Chenga frowned. Which one was right in the end? At this moment, she was instructing the two puppets to walk towards the vine. The vine seemed to have sensed the spiritual energy, and its branches wrapped around the puppets. The two puppets stopped and swung their swords together. With one slash, it only left two shallow wounds on the vines. Then these soft vines wrapped around the two puppets. Xiaohua was a little anxious, so it let out woo-woo sounds. These two puppets had always accompanied it in the virtual sky world, so they already had feelings for each other. Mo Chenga smiled and comforted it. Don't worry. Although the stone sculpture dolls were incredibly strong and hard, the vines were also extremely tough and flexible, perfectly restraining them. It was impossible for them to cut the vines. However, this wasn't Mo Chenga's plan when she took out the puppets. The vines wrapped around the two mannequins until they were unable to move. Then the vines flung them backwards. At this time, Mo Chenga saw that there was a huge pocket between the tangled branches and leaves behind the vines, which looked like a big mouth. When the vines rolled the puppets over, the big mouth opened, and the vines threw the puppets inside. The big mouth closed and began to wriggle as if it was swallowing something. Seeing this scene, Mo Chenga smiled slightly. She moved her divine sense, and the big pocket suddenly protruded. The vine's branches and leaves began to tremble as if they were in pain. Then the trembling became more and more violent, and even the big pocket hidden deep in the back began to twist. All of a sudden, with a rip, a hole appeared in the big pocket. The stone sculpture puppet's stone sword came out from inside, and green liquid flowed out. Xiaohua spell. Xiaohua jumped up and sprayed Sun's real flame. At the same time, Mo Chenga's flying sword slashed forward. While the vine's branches were resisting the sun's real flame, it flew in through the gap and stabbed the big pocket behind it. This time, the flying sword neatly went into the handle and more green liquid flowed out. Then the two stone sculpture puppets broke out of the big pocket. The big pocket was no longer a pocket. It was so tattered that it almost looked like a sieve. More and more green liquid flowed out from inside, and the vine's movements became slower and slower. In the end, they finally hung down and stopped moving. Xiaohua immediately cheered a few times, rushed up, and began to gnaw at the pocket. Mo Chenga also walked over and studied this special vine. If these vines were all monsters, this vine's cultivation level was obviously higher than the others. Even Sun's real flame couldn't burn its branches. She thought for a moment, then used her flying sword to cut the branches. Although she couldn't cut them immediately, she continuously used her flying sword to cut them. In the end, she still cut two of them. At this time, Xiaohua had already eaten the big pocket. Looking at the green vines that were already lifeless, its black eyes turned, and it couldn't help but take a bite. This time it almost bit its teeth to pieces. It jumped up with a woo sound, covered its mouth with its two front paws and jumped around on the ground. Mo Chenga was amused by its actions and grabbed it. Let's see if you're still greedy. Xiaohua covered its mouth for a long time before it blinked, put down its paws and lowered its head pitifully. Mo Chenga stroked its head and said, "This thing is too hard. You can't chew it off. If you want to take it away, it'll take a long time. Let's wait until we come back." She only cut off 2 branches, but it took her so long. If she wanted to take all these things away, it would take her several days. The purpose of her trip was to find Mo Yaoqing's Immortal's Cave, so she'd better finish her business first. She took Xiaohua into the virtual sky world, rested for a while, then left the virtual sky world and continued on their journey. They flew southeast for another 2 days. The sea was vast and there was no trace of an island. Mo Chenga searched for a long time, using the compass to check her position. Eventually she confirmed that the sea map Wei Haolan gave her was correct. There was indeed no big island here. Maybe after 5,000 years, that big island had already disappeared in the boundless sea. Helpless, she could only continue to look for the next sign. Just like that, she flew and stopped, searching for several months. When she was tired, she went into the virtual sky world to rest and play with the 2 spiritual beasts. When she was full of energy, she came out and continued to fly. During this time, she took several wrong turns and encountered several demonic beasts in the sea. On Mo Yaoqing's map, several small islands had already disappeared. Towards the end, the sea chart Wei Haolan gave her also didn't have any records. Mo Yaoqing had no choice but to rely on the compass to correct the direction bit by bit and find the right path. A few months later, Mo Chenga began to feel anxious. Although she didn't need to look for an island to rest and her spiritual aura was always full, every day she flew, she always saw the boundless sea. She didn't even have anyone to talk to, so the mental pressure was getting bigger and bigger. In a place that never changed, it was easy for people to feel anxious, even if she was a cultivator. Just as she was about to reach her limit, her divine sense jumped and she finally sensed spiritual aura fluctuations in the distance. Upon discovering this, Mo Chenga was overjoyed. She had been going around the sea for several months and had almost gone crazy. If she continued like this, she could only give up temporarily and enter the virtual sky world to cultivate her mental state. Fortunately, she finally sensed it. According to Mo Yaoqing's map, this was the last place she had to look for. The spiritual aura fluctuations became stronger and stronger, and an island finally appeared in her line of sight. Mo Chenga was ecstatic. She was glad that this island didn't become one of the sunken islands. If it did, her trip would have been in vain. But at this time, she became more cautious because Mo Yaoqing clearly said in the Jade slip that there were powerful formations and restrictions in the Immortal's cave she passed away in meditation. Mo Yaoqing was a genius. The part about formations in her notes gave Mo Chenga a lot of inspiration, not to mention the Immortal's cave she personally set up. Even if she had the map in her hand, Mo Chenga didn't dare to take it lightly. When she got closer, Mo Chenga circled several times over the island. This was a small island with a circumference of about 5 miles. It was surrounded by clouds and faint spiritual aura, giving off a fairy-like aura. Mo Chenga could see that there should be a middle-level spirit vein on this island, but most of the spiritual aura was restrained and only a small amount of spiritual aura escaped. This kind of spiritual aura couldn't attract the attention of high-level demonic beasts, but some low-level sea beasts appeared around the island. The island was ring-shaped. The outermost layer was a beach, and the inner layer was a gradually raised small mountain. Looking down from above in the blue sea, a layer of fine white sand surrounded a piece of green, looking very beautiful. On the highest mountain in the middle, Mo Chenga found traces of formations, which were consistent with the records in Mo Yaoqing's Jade slip. After confirming she was in the right place, Mo Chenga spread her hand and the white silk handkerchief flew out, turning into a thin mist that surrounded her. Then she held the heaven and earth fan tightly and slowly descended. Although she found the place, it was hard to say whether it was dangerous or not. After all, 5,000 years had passed, so it was normal to have some changes in the middle. When she finally stepped on the ground, Mo Chenga spread her divine sense first. Except for the location of the Immortal's cave mentioned by Mo Yaoqing, there was no danger in other places. She felt a little relieved and walked towards the Immortal's cave. Mo Yaoqing said there was a 7 extremes formation she created outside the Immortal's cave. She didn't explain how to break this formation in the Jade slip, which could be regarded as a test for future generations. Coincidentally, Mo Chenga had obtained her personal notes, which contained sporadic records about this 7 extremes formation. Coupled with her own attainments and formations, she had a certain degree of confidence in breaking this formation. The so-called 7 extremes formation was actually the 5 elements in yin and yang. Each extreme was a test, and this formation was composed of 7 tests. Mo Yaoqing called this formation 7 extremes because she was proud of herself. She thought she had reached the pinnacle of combining the 5 elements in yin and yang in her cultivation realm, so she named it 7 extremes. In this formation, the 5 elements suddenly changed. Sometimes they restrained each other and sometimes they promoted each other. It seemed to be metal, but it could also be water or fire. Yin and yang were mixed up, and it would be difficult to distinguish whether it was yin or yang unless one was extremely proficient in formations. Therefore, the secret to breaking this formation was actually one word: divide. As long as the division was clear, this formation would be easy to break. Chapter 331. Mo Tiange didn't enter the formation immediately. She already had an idea on how to break this 7 extremes formation and had been preparing for months. At this time, she directed the 2 stone sculpture puppets to enter the formation and triggered the formation one by sensing it with her divine sense. These 2 puppets weren't living creatures and their materials were very special, so they wouldn't be affected by this formation at all. Mo Tiange manipulated them with her divine sense and could clearly feel the changes in the formation. She manipulated them very carefully. Every time she found a suspicious point, she repeatedly used the puppets to test it until she figured out the changes of the 5 elements in yin. This process took a full 2 days. This 7 extremes formation was really too big and too complicated. 2 days later, Mo Tiange let the 2 stone sculpture puppets come out of the 7 extremes formation. She had roughly figured out the changes of the 5 elements in yin in this 7 extremes formation, and she already had a way to deal with it. She still didn't enter the 7 extremes formation. Instead, she directly entered the virtual sky world and began to refine a magic weapon. She was still very clumsy about refining tools, but this time she wasn't going to refine an ordinary magic weapon, but a formation tool. Formations and magic weapons were originally completely different fields, but under special circumstances, they could also be interconnected. Mo Tiange was very familiar with making formation tools. Even if she wasn't good at refining tools, the probability of refining it into a magic weapon wouldn't be too low. She got the inspiration for this method of breaking formations from Qinshi. Qinshi had a magic weapon called the peak positioning lamp, which had a miraculous effect on breaking restrictions. Restrictions and formations were interconnected. Although it wasn't very common to use a magic weapon to break formations, it wasn't impossible. Of course, magic weapons used to break formations were very rare. For one thing, different formations required different methods of breaking formations. For another, such a magic weapon required the maker's attainments in formations to be too high. Formation masters were very rare in the cultivation world today. Most of the people who were good at formations were nascent soul cultivators who had a long life and were bored. However, their cultivation levels were superb, so they could completely break formations on the spot. Few people were bored enough to make a magic weapon to break formations. The reason why Mo Tiange wanted to make this magic weapon was that this 7 extremes formation was too powerful. Mo Yaoqing hid the jade slip so deeply that only nascent soul cultivators could see it, but she was only in the core formation realm now. Just now, after using the stone sculpture puppets to test the formation, he understood that if he were to personally enter the formation to break it, he would inevitably suffer some injuries. Thus, it was better to use a safer method. Another month passed as the refinement continued. The way of formations, to put it bluntly, was the understanding of the 5 elements yin and yang as well as precise calculations. This 7 extremes formation was Mo Yaoqing's proud work. It contained a huge amount of data, so calculating it was a very tiring thing. If she hadn't read Mo Yaoqing's notes, Mo Tiange admitted that even if she had completely comprehended the Xuanji formation book, it would have taken her at least several months to completely deduce the 7 extremes formation. But in Mo Yaoqing's notes, there were fragmentary records of this formation, so she spent a month to comprehend the data of this formation. As long as the data of the 5 elements in yin and yang were clear, it would be a simple matter to create a tool to break the formation. After a few more days, the formation-breaking magic treasure was finally completed. Mo Tiange called this magic treasure the star positioning compass. It was similar to a compass, but it was more sensitive to yin and yang and the 5 elements. After the star positioning compass was completed, Mo Tiange rested in the virtual sky world for a day. Then she came out of the virtual sky world full of energy and faced the 7 extremes formation again. This time, the 2 stone sculpture puppets were still the first to enter. After the 2 puppets entered the formation, the 7 extremes formation suddenly burst into dazzling light. 5 colors of gold, cyan, blue, red, and yellow appeared, and black shadows and white lights kept flashing. At the same time, the moment the 7 extremes formation was activated, the spiritual aura on the whole island became chaotic. When the formation was completely triggered, Mo Tiange calmly took out the star positioning compass. The star positioning compass flew into the 7 extremes formation and emitted a sparkling white light. Under this white light, the surrounding 5 elements slowly stabilized. Of course, the 7 extremes formation wasn't so easy to break. After discovering this force, the 5 elements around the star positioning compass twisted and immediately changed into another combination of 5 elements. The star positioning compass continued to emit white light, combing the surrounding 5 elements one by one. At this time, Mo Chenga had laid a small spirit gathering formation outside the formation, sat down cross-legged and operated the Taiyuan record. With the yang spiritual aura, a complete origin had been formed in her body, so it wouldn't be a big problem for her to directly practice the Taiyuan record. The star positioning compass could comb the 5 elements, but there was a simpler way to stabilize yin and yang, which was to use the Taiyuan record to drive the yin and yang spiritual aura around her to form a origin. In this way, yin and yang would be under her control and it would no longer be chaotic. Time passed bit by bit. No matter how the 7 extremes formation changed, the star positioning compass always emitted a stable white light, reversing the surrounding 5 elements. The 2 poles of yin and yang driven by Mo Chenga had formed a cycle. After a stalemate, the 7 extremes formation gathered a huge force and rushed to the star positioning compass in the formation. With a solemn expression, Mo Chenga made a hand seal, gathered spiritual aura in her palm, and hit the star positioning compass. She used several high-grade spirit stones as the source of spiritual aura in this star positioning compass, but it was still not enough for the 7 extremes formation. This formation had existed here for so many years, but it could still operate. It should be like Wanderer Ziwei, which directly used the spirit vein itself. Therefore, the formation wouldn't lose its effectiveness unless the spirit vein dissipated after a long time. But now was obviously not the time to lose its effectiveness. Its power might have weakened, but its power was still huge. Mo Chenga could only continuously transmit her spiritual aura to the star positioning compass, while she relied on the spirit gathering formation, spirit stones, and spirit recovering pills to restore her spiritual aura. This was a battle of spiritual aura. As long as she had enough spiritual aura, breaking the formation was only a matter of time. The spiritual power stalemate lasted for 3 full days. 3 days later, a loud explosion came from the 7 extremes formation. The star positioning compass suddenly absorbed a large amount of spiritual aura and exploded. At the same time, the power of the 7 extremes formation finally dissipated. Mo Chenga sat cross-legged on the ground for a long time. For 3 days she had been continuously transmitting spiritual aura, so she was now extremely tired. After adjusting her breath for a long time, she finally recovered her spirit. She stood up, took back the puppet, walked into the broken 7 extremes formation, picked up the star positioning compass on the ground and sighed. This star positioning compass used a lot of rare materials, but it was still destroyed. If she went inside to break the formation herself, she really didn't know how dangerous it would be. After passing through the broken 7 extremes formation, Mo Chenga saw a narrow entrance. This entrance seemed to be just a crack between the rocks. Through the crack, she could only see a very small valley with nothing else in sight. Mo Chenga took out the jade slip and compared it to the entrance. After confirming it was the right place, she walked in. She went straight into the depths of the valley. She cast an art and hit the mountain wall. The mountain wall opened with a sound, revealing a cave as tall as a person. She then stepped inside. The cave was very dark, almost without light. Presumably, even if there was a moonstone, it had lost its light after thousands of years. She took out a mother moonstone from her Chengkuan bag, hung it around her waist and slowly walked forward. The rest of the journey was very smooth. There were a few tests that Mo Yaoqing held back, but Mo Chenga was prepared in advance, so she passed them one by one. Finally, after walking through a stone path, the front suddenly opened up. Mo Chenga looked around. This was a ring-shaped valley, green grass, and the sun was shining brightly. She found it a bit unbelievable. When she came down from the sky, she didn't see this valley at all. It seemed to be hidden by a restriction, but she didn't find any trace of it. In that case, her smooth journey was simply because Mo Yaoqing didn't intend to make things difficult for later generations. Otherwise, she didn't know how long it would take her to find the entrance with this restriction alone. Although the valley was green and full of vitality, weeds were everywhere and had long been abandoned. Mo Chenga occasionally saw a few spiritual plants, but she didn't take them seriously. After all, the spiritual aura here wasn't good, and the spiritual plants were also very thin. Even if they were old, they were completely inferior to the virtual sky world. On the mountain wall surrounding the valley there were several caves. Mo Chenga cautiously took out Mo Yaoqing's jade slip and carefully compared it. After understanding the purpose of these caves, she entered them one by one. These caves were nothing more than a cultivation room, a concocting room, a spiritual beast room, and so on. There was nothing in the spiritual beast room. When Mo Yaoqing passed away in meditation, she released her spiritual beasts. Mo Chenga entered the pill concocting room, tool refining room, and so on. She found several kinds of rare tools, so she picked one or two that she needed and put them into her Chengquan bag. The jade slips Mo Yaoqing left behind were for the descendants of the Mo family and for the disciples of Bishuan court. If she took all of them and some nascent soul disciples of Bishuan court came looking for them in the future, there would be nothing left. She wasn't greedy and didn't intend to cut off other people's escape routes. In the end, she entered the cultivation room. This cultivation room was narrow and winding, and there were messy things everywhere. There were all kinds of materials, books, jade slips, and some strange things whose uses she didn't know. Mo Chenga looked at them one by one, feeling a bit incredulous. It wasn't because these materials were rare, but because they were placed in such a messy way. With a Chengquan bag, these things naturally didn't need to be piled up in the cave. The fact that they were piled up randomly like this could only mean one thing. Mo Yaoqing was very lazy. After she used them, she just threw them away and was too lazy to tidy them up. Mo Chenga sighed as she continued to walk inside. The Immortal's Cave left behind by Miss Yaoqing, who had a gentle voice and was said by Yuan Bao to be incomparably charming, was actually like this? This was a bit too. Just as this thought crossed her mind, she turned into the depths of the cultivation room. When she saw the innermost jade platform, she instantly became speechless, completely speechless. A woman was sitting on the jade platform. She was sitting cross-legged with a dignified bearing. Her eyes were closed and her expression was calm. Her eyebrows were like distant mountains, her face was like the autumn moon, her skin was like snow, and her black hair was like clouds. She was just sitting there casually, but there wasn't a single part of her that wasn't beautiful. Ever since she set foot on the path to immortality, Mo Chenga had seen a lot of beautiful women. Even she herself, although she couldn't be said to be beautiful enough to captivate birds and beasts, she was still elegant and handsome. However, there had never been a woman who could make the words, devastatingly beautiful, involuntarily emerge in her heart. This woman's beauty was indeed something she had never seen in her life. After a long time, Mo Chenga finally regained her composure and heaved a sigh of relief. Although this woman was vivid and lifelike, just like a living person, Mo Chenga knew this was nothing more than a skeleton. Aside from Mo Yaoqing, there was naturally no one else but a skeleton sitting cross-legged in this cave. With this thought in mind, Mo Chenga felt it was inconceivable. Her ancestor, a female cultivator who lived more than 5,000 years ago, possessed a pure Yin constitution and was a world-shaking talent, was actually such an astonishingly beautiful woman. Chapter 332. In Mo Chenga's mind, Yuan Bao's description of her as the incomparably charming and charming Miss Yaoqing emerged. This kind of appearance was indeed worthy of the words, incomparably charming and charming. Her demeanor was very dignified, and there was not a trace of frivolity on her face. However, one could not help but feel that there was a flirtatious feeling emanating from her bones. Mo Chenga couldn't help but wonder how beautiful she would be if she was still alive. With just a smile, all the men in the world would fall head over heels for her. Zhong Muling really took advantage of her. No wonder he wasn't angry even after being schemed against like that. After pondering for a moment, Mo Chenga brushed her robes and knelt down. Great Ancestor, this junior Mo Chenga, received Great Ancestor's guidance when I was a child. You passed on the art of Sunu to me and I set foot on the path to immortality. Now that I have achieved some success in my immortal cultivation, I followed Great Ancestor's ruins to come here. I didn't expect to see Great Ancestor's remains. If I have offended you in any way, please forgive me. Then he respectfully kowtowed 3 times before standing up. The reason why Mo Yaoqing's corpse hadn't rotted even after 5,000 years was probably because she had some kind of treasure on her. Mo Chenga naturally wouldn't take it away. Not to mention that such an action would be too disrespectful to this ancestor, she was also reluctant to destroy such a beautiful body. After apologizing, Mo Chenga raised her head and looked around, searching for the things she needed. The ground was full of materials, but these weren't her goal. In terms of wealth, although she wasn't as good as a nascent soul cultivator like Mo Yaoqing, she still had a lot of treasures. Her most important purpose was to obtain the cultivation insights Mo Yaoqing left behind. After searching for a while among the miscellaneous items, he found that none of the books and jade slips that had been casually thrown around were of any value. However, there were also some extremely valuable secret records of cultivation methods among them. Mo Chenga picked them up, then put them aside, preparing to make a copy to take with her. After searching for a while, Mo Chenga still couldn't find what she wanted. Mo Chenga was extremely puzzled. Mo Yaoqing's jade slip recorded it very clearly, so it was impossible that it didn't exist. On second thought, there were all kinds of materials piled up on the ground. There were no magic treasures or the like. Could it be that they were placed somewhere else? Mo Chenga searched the small and narrow cultivation room for a long time. She also checked Mo Yaoqing's jade slip to confirm that there wasn't anything like a treasure storing room here. A thought flashed through her mind, and she shifted her gaze to Mo Yaoqing. She had searched everywhere else except for this place. Great ancestor, please forgive this junior for offending you. After Mo Chenga cupped her hands again, she reached under the praying mat Mo Yaoqing was sitting on and fumbled around. Sure enough, she pulled out a Chengkuan bag from underneath. Delighted, she took the Chengkuan bag and put her hand inside. She was shocked again. There were too many treasures here. Looking at the materials piled up in the cultivation room, Mo Yaoqing's net worth was already extraordinary, but compared to the things in the Chengkuan bag, it was nothing. Mo Chenga took out these magic weapons and placed them on the ground one by one. There were actually about 20 to 30 of them. Moreover, these magic weapons were all high-grade magic weapons. Based on Mo Yaoqing's attainments in tool refining, the magic weapons she left in her Chengkuan bag and brought to the place of her death obviously weren't ordinary. Mo Chenga felt like she didn't know where to start. Her master, Lord Daoist Jinghe, had always been very generous to her. The magic weapons he bestowed her were also of excellent quality, but compared to Mo Yaoqing's magic weapons, they weren't good enough. It wasn't that Lord Daoist Jinghe's net worth was inferior to Mo Yaoqing's, but the magic weapons Lord Daoist Jinghe gave her were common magic weapons for juniors, while Mo Yaoqing's magic weapons were the trump cards of a nascent soul cultivator. The two of them originally couldn't be compared. She thought for a long time but still didn't know how to choose, so she simply put them aside and continued to search in her Chengkuan bag. As she searched, she found many jade slips. She injected her divine sense into them one by one, feeling ecstatic. She finally found them. Among these jade slips, there was a copy of Mo Yaoqing's cultivation experience, a copy of her life experience, and a copy for the juniors who found this place. Cultivator who came here, I don't know whether you're a descendant of the Mo family or a disciple of Bichuan court. If you're neither, being able to find this place and break my 7 extremes formation can be considered fate. You may take 1/5 of the treasures in this immortal's cave and choose 5 magic weapons in this Chengkuan bag. Remember, you can't be greedy. Otherwise, the restrictions in this immortal's cave will be activated in an instant and you'll be killed. After reading this message, Mo Chenga suddenly broke out in a cold sweat. With Mo Yaoqing's attainments and formations, she believed these words weren't empty words. The restrictions in this immortal's cave completely concealed this valley. If she just flew over it, she wouldn't be able to see any trace of it, so it was obvious how amazing these restrictions were. Fortunately, she wasn't greedy. If she impatiently put these materials into her Chengkuan bag right after she entered the immortal's cave, the restrictions might have been activated, or she might have taken all these magic weapons as soon as she saw them. In that case, she would have become a skeleton by now. After calming herself down, she continued to read. The following was an introduction to these magic weapons. She looked at them carefully and compared them to the real objects, slowly choosing them. The first magic weapon she chose was called Spirit Guiding Bead. This bead couldn't be used directly in fights of magical power, but it could store spiritual aura and be used like a spirit stone during fights of magical power. The spiritual aura this bead could store was much more than a spirit stone. Because of the special effect of the art of the origin, Mo Chenga's spiritual aura consumption during fights of magical power was slightly less than that of ordinary cultivators. However, if she had this spirit guiding bead, she wouldn't need to worry about spiritual aura in fights of magical power in the future. The second one was called Tai Chi 8 diagrams. This diagram was painted with Tai Chi 8 diagrams, which was all-encompassing and had the effect of automatically combing spiritual aura and stabilizing yin and yang. Its function was similar to the star positioning compass Mo Chenga refined before, but its effect was many times stronger. With this thing, it would be much easier to break the 7 extremes formation, and she wouldn't need to consume so much spiritual aura. The third one was the Lotus umbrella. This umbrella was very exquisite, and there were many budding pink lotuses painted on it. Could be seen that Mo Yaoqing was also a woman who loved beauty. Mo Yaoqing said that when this umbrella was opened, the poisonous and demonic aura around her would not be able to invade, and it would automatically attack the enemy. It was the best magic weapon when fighting against demonic creatures. The fourth one was called Spirit Cloud's Rui. This was an offensive magic weapon. The several magic weapons Mo Chenga chose before were all for auxiliary use in fights of magical power. Her Heaven and Earth fan was also more defensive than offensive, so she chose an offensive magic weapon this time. This magic weapon contained amazing spiritual aura. Once it was thrown out, it could cause the surrounding spiritual aura to explode, causing a great impact on the enemy. As for the last one, she thought for a long time and finally decided on a teleportation magic weapon, the Land Shrinking Ruler. When she escaped from Mount Yunwu, Qin Shi gave her a magic tool he stole from Yunwu's sect, the Land Fleeing Ruler. In the foundation building realm, this magic tool was a good tool for escaping, but after she formed her gold core when fighting against people, the enemy's divine sense and speed were many times stronger than those in the foundation building realm, so this magic tool wasn't so effective anymore. Now that she obtained this Land Shrinking Ruler, not only could she teleport but it could also increase her speed. When used together with her cloud-treading boots, it was a good tool for escaping. She no longer put all her hopes on the virtual sky world. Ren Yufeng's experience made her realize that her virtual sky world would occasionally fail. Moreover, it would take several breaths of time to enter the virtual sky world. In fights of magical power between high-level cultivators, several breaths of time could often determine life and death. After she finished choosing her magic weapon, Mo Chenga copied all of Mo Yaoqing's books and jade slips, regardless of whether they were useful or not, then put them into her Chengkuan bag. Although Mo Chenga said she couldn't take 1/5 of the books, she only copied them and didn't take the original ones. That shouldn't be too much, right? As for the materials piled on the ground, she chose some rare ones. Fortunately, she also had a lot of materials on her, so she didn't need to worry too much. After she finished collecting them, Mo Chenga put the remaining magic weapons and jade slips back into Mo Yaoqing's Chengkuan bag and put them under the praying mat, returning them to their original appearance. This way, if Bichuan court disciples came looking for them in the future, they'd also have to go through the same test. After doing all this, Mo Chenga once again knelt in front of Mo Yaoqing's corpse. Junior Mo Chenga is extremely grateful for great ancestors' gift. I hereby kowtow to express my gratitude. After kowtowing, she carefully withdrew from Mo Yaoqing's cultivation room. But just as he exited the room, a restriction suddenly appeared at the entrance of the cultivation chamber, sealing it. Mo Chenga was stunned, but she soon realized that the 7 extremes formation outside must have been broken, so the restriction on this cultivation room must have been temporarily removed. When she withdrew from the cultivation room, the restriction automatically restored itself. She was both shocked and regretful. She was shocked because she knew a lot about the Tao of formations. She knew that it wasn't difficult to set up a powerful formation, but it was quite difficult to make it automatically restore itself after it was broken. In that case, the so-called breaking of the formation was nothing but a test for the junior. Mo Yaoqing's attainments and formations were actually far superior to hers. Fortunately, she copied all of Mo Yaoqing's jade slips and books. If she studied them slowly, she should be able to learn the secrets of formations. She regretted that she didn't plan to leave the island immediately. The reason why she withdrew from the cultivation room was because she felt it was a bit disrespectful for her to study Mo Yaoqing's corpse inside. She didn't expect that by retreating she would tacitly admit that she'd already made her choice, so the restriction was restored again. If she wanted to enter again, she would have to break the formation again. However, if she tried to break the formation again, it would take a lot of effort even if she had the Tai Chi 8 diagrams now. Her main purpose had been achieved, and there was nothing else she needed to take, so she didn't need to waste her effort. Mo Chenga sighed at the restriction at the entrance of the cultivation room and decided to forget about it. Even if there was something she hadn't chosen, it was just some materials which she wasn't in urgent need of. With that thought, she sat cross-legged in the valley outside the cultivation room and began to study the jade slips she just obtained. The first thing she took was Mo Yaoqing's life record. After injecting her divine sense into it, the following information appeared in her mind. My name is Mo Yaoqing. I'm a cultivator from Yunzhong. Because I have a pure Yin constitution and double spiritual roots, I entered the Danxia sect of the righteous path when I was a child and worshipped Master Taoist Qixia as my master. Then she recorded some of her experiences in the sect in detail. The more Mo Chenga read, the more surprised she became. According to Mo Yaoqing, Yunzhong was completely different from the celestial pole. In the cultivation world of the celestial pole, aside from Taoist cultivators, there were only a few Confucian cultivators. The devil path was suppressed in the small area north of extraterrestrial devil after the Great War between the righteous and devil path, and the devil path cultivators were only active in the forest south of Kunwu. In Yunzhong, however, the cultivators of Taoist, devil, Buddhist, Confucian, and devil path cultivators all lived together. Although Taoist cultivators also occupied an absolute advantage, the various Taoists occasionally had disputes, but usually they lived in harmony. Yunzhong was extremely large and had many spirit veins, unlike the celestial pole, which basically had all spirit veins in Kunwu. Therefore, there were also many more cultivators in Yunzhong than in the celestial pole. Chapter 333. Yunzhong was located in the south of the celestial pole. After crossing Kunwu Mountain, the southern forest and the South Sea, one would arrive in Yunzhong. Because there were many demonic beasts in the southern forest and the East Sea was separated by demonic mountain, few cultivators in the celestial pole knew about the situation in Yunzhong. Even those who were knowledgeable only knew that there was a piece of land south of the sea. Over time, people in the celestial pole just called it Shannon, meaning south of Kunwu Mountain. Although Yunzhong and the celestial pole were only separated by the South Sea, only a few cultivators could reach the other land since ancient times. There were countless high-level sea beasts in the South Sea, and it was said that 8th or 9th rank sea beasts were not uncommon. Sea beasts above the 5th rank could generally fly. 8th or 9th rank sea beasts were equivalent to human cultivators in the early or middle stage of the nascent soul realm. Once one was entangled by these high-level sea beasts in the sea, even a nascent soul cultivator would find it difficult to escape. In addition, the weather in the South Sea was unpredictable and gales and tsunamis were common, which added a lot of variables to crossing the South Sea. According to Mo Yaoqing, Yunzhong was a bit bigger than the celestial pole. Most importantly, it had a lot of spirit veins distributed everywhere, so there were also a lot of cultivators. In Yunzhong, cultivation was a very common thing, and mortals were also very enthusiastic about it, although most of them could only cultivate a little spiritual aura and couldn't even reach the first layer of the aura refining realm. This was different from the celestial pole. In the celestial pole, because Kunwu Mountain had the largest spirit veins, there were only some weak spirit veins in the secular world, so 80% of cultivators gathered in Kunwu Mountain. Most mortals in the secular world only heard about the legends of immortals and didn't know much about cultivation. Because of the prevalence of cultivation, there were a lot of high-level cultivators in Yunzhong. Ordinary small cultivation groups had 1 or 2 nascent soul cultivators, and big cultivation groups even had more than 10 nascent soul cultivators. Seeing this, Mo Tiange was very surprised. Tiandao sect was the biggest cultivation group in the celestial pole, but in its heyday, it usually only had 6 or 7 nascent soul cultivators and never had more than 10. If there were more than 10 nascent soul cultivators, the sect should have tens of thousands of disciples, which was quite incredible for the celestial pole. Yunzhong's cultivation resources were also very rich because Yunzhong was accessible in all directions. In the south was the returning ruined sea, in the east was the Yuanzhou continent, and in the west was Shaoyang. Except for the celestial pole in the north, which was too dangerous to set foot in due to the sea, Yunzhong had connections with all the nearby continents. This scene greatly broadened Mo Tiange's horizons. Living in the celestial pole, she thought other places were like the celestial pole, where it was difficult to communicate with the outside world, but it turned out that there were places like Yunzhong that were accessible from all directions and could come and go at will. The sect Mo Yaoqing entered was called Danxia sect, and it was also a Dao cultivation sect. Even in Yunzhong, cultivators were the most numerous among all kinds of cultivators. They, along with Buddhist and Confucian cultivators, were known as the righteous path. Danxia sect could also be considered a big sect in Yunzhong. When Mo Yaoqing was there were 9 nascent soul cultivators, more than 80 core formation cultivators and 10,000 disciples. After describing the general situation in Yunzhong, Mo Yaoqing began to record what she had experienced one by one. As Mo Tiange read, she sighed with emotion. 4 female cultivators being too beautiful wasn't a good thing. Mo Yaoqing's spiritual roots weren't bad, and coupled with her pure Yin constitution, she became a disciple of Master Taoist Qixia, a nascent soul cultivator. In Yunzhong, titles were very casual, unlike in the celestial pole, where core formation cultivators were called Master Taoist and nascent soul cultivators were called Lord Taoist. Master Daoist Qixia was also a female cultivator. After she accepted Mo Yaoqing as her disciple, she valued her very much. Therefore, for more than 100 years, Mo Yaoqing had always been a proud daughter of heaven. She had excellent qualifications, a high status and a beautiful appearance. Not to mention in Danxia sect, she was also famous in the entire righteous path. Some people even gave her a nickname, Yaodai Fairy. However, Mo Yaoqing was dismissive of this reputation. Under the reputation of Yaotai Fairy, no one saw her exceptional intelligence. She comprehended spells very quickly and had a unique understanding of Taoist scriptures. She could often modify some spells to make them more powerful. She even had good talents in pill concocting, tool refining, formations and talisman making. However, what others saw was only the fairy of the Yaotai Pavilion's stunning beauty and decent aptitude. Many young cultivators fell in love with her, and among them, there was no lack of high-level cultivators who wanted to marry her and become dual cultivation partners. But to Mo Yaoqing, these only added to her troubles. Because she was beautiful and looked around, many cultivators thought they were in love with her. If they talked to her or saw her smile, they would think she had feelings for them, so they would come to pester her. If she didn't pretend to be nice to them, those male cultivators would think she seduced them first and then turned her back on them later. Because of this, Yaotai Fairy's reputation became worse and worse. There were always people who said she played with people's feelings and acted unrestrained. Over time, Mo Yaoqing couldn't stand being annoyed and hated male cultivators even more. She put all her heart and soul into cultivating and didn't leave her immortal's cave. Only then did the rumors gradually die down. Mo Chinga felt it was unfair for her. She had seen Mo Yaoqing's body. She looked dignified and serious, but she still gave people a feeling of infinite charm. Mo Yaoqing's description shouldn't be exaggerated. Even if she didn't mean it, people always thought she deliberately seduced them. With the appearance of a fairy and the charm of a seductress, it would be strange if those male cultivators didn't go crazy for her. Mo Yaoqing was actually quite proud of herself. Her qualifications were good, but her wisdom was amazing. Her understanding of spells was unique, and cultivators in the same realm often couldn't compare to her. However, these cultivators who were inferior to her always said she played with people's feelings and was fickle, which made Mo Yaoqing feel even more disgusted. In her mind, these cultivators were as stupid as pigs and loved to stir up trouble. They weren't worthy of her even a second glance. Mo Chinga stared at the contempt in Mo Yaoqing's words and thought to herself, no wonder Mo Yaoqing never fell in love with any man in her life. Even Zhong Muling, who's fated to be her husband, only had a good impression of her. Her wariness towards men is really deep-rooted. Mo Yaoqing formed her gold core when she was more than 100 years old. She originally thought those rumors should be far away from her. After all, after advancing to the core formation realm, one would be a high-level cultivator. Who would dare to talk about high-level cultivators? Who would have thought that her big crisis would come at this time? Her master naturally wouldn't tell anyone about her pure Yin constitution. Aside from several nascent soul martial uncles and the disciple who led her into the sect, no one else knew about it. Mo Yaoqing had always been against male cultivators, so she never thought about dual cultivation. She had long forgotten about her pure Yin constitution. But right at this time, the head Grand Supreme Elder of the sect suggested to her that she should perform dual cultivation with his blood-related junior. This Grand Supreme Elder's blood-related junior was also a core formation cultivator, so her aptitude wasn't bad. However, Mo Yaoqing was a prideful person and she despised male cultivators very much, so how could she agree? Seeing that she didn't comply, the Grand Supreme Elder didn't force her at first. Instead, he let her master try to persuade her. Mo Yaoqing recorded, I'm indebted to master and I also understand her suffering. However, it's absolutely impossible for me to perform dual cultivation with someone else. Most men in this world have lust in their hearts, but they don't dare to admit it and can only push the blame onto women. It's hateful that I didn't understand what a pure Yin constitution means until now. Unable to persuade her, the Grand Supreme Elder gradually lost his patience. Mo Yaoqing noticed this, so she pretended to be unwilling and made many requests to the Grand Supreme Elder. Seeing that she was willing to give in, the Grand Supreme Elder was delighted and agreed to all of her requests. Then, taking advantage of their momentary negligence, Mo Yaoqing escaped from Danxia sect. In any case, Danxia sect was a big sect on the righteous path, and Mo Yaoqing had just advanced to the core formation realm not long ago. How could she escape from Danxia sect's pursuit? Mo Yaoqing made up her mind and actually abolished her cultivation level, changed her appearance and hid in the secular world. In Yunzhong, even mortals liked to cultivate, so there were many people like her who had a little bit of spiritual aura. Hiding in the secular world like this made it easier for them to avoid being caught. Mo Yaoqing's move of throwing herself into a dead end succeeded. She evaded Danxia sect's pursuit and successfully left Danxia sect's sphere of influence. Then she found a small place, hid, and started to cultivate again. Seeing this, Mo Tiange was extremely shocked. It was true that cultivation level could be abolished, but what kind of willpower did that require? This almost completely destroyed her dantian and meridians. If she didn't have enough willpower, she would probably die from the pain. Besides, Mo Yaoqing abolished her cultivation level on her own. How many people in this world would be willing to abolish the cultivation level they had painstakingly cultivated? To cultivate again, it might be twice or even 10 times more difficult than before. But in the Jade slip, Mo Yaoqing only downplayed this experience. At this point, Mo Tiange already admired this ancestor from the bottom of her heart. She thought she was already doing well among female cultivators, but compared to Mo Yaoqing, she was still not good enough. Although she lost her cultivation level, Mo Yaoqing still had her family treasures. She was a nascent soul cultivator's disciple in Danxia sect, so she had a lot of offerings. Moreover, before she escaped, she also asked the Grand Supreme Elder for a lot of treasures, which she took with her. Relying on these treasures and spirit stones, Mo Yaoqing turned into an individual cultivator and hid in the secular world. She slowly nurtured her dantian and meridians, then she started to cultivate again. Little by little she built her foundation, formed her gold core. Even though her mental state was already strong enough, it still took her 200 years to recultivate to the core formation realm. This time she was very cautious and cultivated her breath-concealing technique to a very high level before she went out. She didn't dare to show her original face, so she usually put makeup on her face and dressed up in a tacky and seductive way. Her personality was originally very firm. After experiencing being forced to perform dual cultivation, she became even more ruthless. Anyone who offended her was killed without exception. If there was anyone who didn't have eyes and coveted her, she would use a secret technique to absorb their cultivation level. Over time, because she often used a magic weapon called the soul-frightening bell, she was called the Golden Bell Witch. Relying on her good aptitude and intelligence, Mo Yaoqing cultivated to the peak stage of the core formation realm and began to attack the nascent soul realm. However, because her cultivation level was once crippled, her dantian and meridians were weaker than ordinary people's, so it was very difficult for her to attack the nascent soul realm. But at that time she was no longer young. If she delayed, her chances of advancing to the nascent soul realm would slowly decrease. Mo Yaoqing hated Danxia sect to the bone. She once swore to take revenge on that Grand Supreme Elder and his descendants, so how could she be willing to die like this? Right at that time she met Zhong Muling and discovered his spiritual roots of the origin. Chapter 334. Mo Yaoqing was a proud person. She didn't want to perform dual cultivation with others because of her self-esteem, not because of her so-called chastity. Her growing age and the increasing number of enemies forced her to make a decision. She was decisive and did what she had to, so she quickly made a decision. In any case, she didn't value chastity and Zhong Muling was someone she had a good impression of, so why not? Thus, she plotted against Zhong Muling and used the plucking technique to rush into the nascent soul realm in one fell swoop. After she entered the nascent soul realm, Mo Yaoqing went to Danxia sect to cause trouble. She was alone, so she naturally couldn't oppose the entire Danxia sect, so she secretly killed many descendants of that Grand Supreme Elder. This method was indeed a bit ruthless, but Mo Tiange only sighed when she thought of her previous experience. With Mo Yaoqing's qualifications, she formed her gold core when she was 100 years old. If her cultivation went smoothly, she would probably form her nascent soul when she was 300 years old. However, she spent 200 years and suffered unspeakable hardships. If she wasn't smart enough back then, she probably wouldn't have been able to escape the fate of being forced. Of course, Danxia sect still had cultivators in the late stage of the nascent soul realm. Mo Yaoqing, who had just formed her nascent soul, couldn't afford to offend any of them. Moreover, she had many other enemies. Therefore, after venting her anger, Mo Yaoqing made a prompt decision to flee far away. Later, due to a strange combination of factors, she arrived in the Celestial Pole. When she arrived in the Celestial Pole, she settled in Linhai town on the coast of the Eastern Sea. Mo Tiange knew what happened next. She established Bichuan court and temporarily took shelter in Linhai. However, right at that moment she discovered she was pregnant. By that time, 5 years had passed since she and Zhong Muling became husband and wife. According to common sense, if a woman was pregnant, she would give birth after 10 months of pregnancy. However, Mo Yaoqing was a cultivator, so there was a very small chance of a hidden fetus. The so-called hidden fetus was when the fetus was wrapped in spiritual aura before it developed, so there were no signs of pregnancy. After Mo Yaoqing and Zhong Muling became husband and wife, she entered closed-door meditation to form her nascent soul. During soul formation, spiritual aura intertwined, so the possibility of this happening was very high. Because of this, Zhong Muling never knew about this child. It wasn't until many years later that he discovered Mo Yaoqing left him a bloodline. In the end, Mo Yaoqing couldn't bear to part with this child. In consideration of his father, Zhong Muling, who was a kind person, she finally decided to give birth to this child. Unfortunately, although this child had 2 nascent soul cultivators as his parents, he didn't have spiritual roots. Mo Yaoqing had no choice but to go to the secular world. She pretended to be immortal for several decades and raised this child. It was only after the child grew up, married, and had children that Mo Yaoqing pretended to die of old age, escaped and returned to Linhai. After reading up to this point, Mo Chenga had a different view of this ancestor. Apart from having a firm and decisive personality, she was also a woman and a mother. Many cultivators disdain children without spiritual roots, but she was willing to pretend to be immortal for decades for this child. From this account, Mo Chenga could sense the sorrow revealed between the lines. She had been pregnant for several years and gave birth to a child who was connected to her flesh and blood. However, he didn't have a spiritual root, so she could only watch him grow old and die of illness. Therefore, she would rather leave the child in the secular world and cut off their relationship. Giving birth was a cruel thing for cultivators. Even if both parents were nascent soul cultivators, there was no guarantee that their children would have spiritual roots. She couldn't help but think of herself. After she and Qin Shi became husband and wife, neither of them mentioned this problem. She vaguely thought about it, but she didn't think too much about it. Compared to mortals, it was harder for cultivators to get pregnant. Only now did she realize how cruel this problem was. She and Qin Shi were both people with firm Tao hearts. Ascetic cultivators weren't suitable to have children, let alone such a problem. What if he didn't have spiritual roots? How cruel would it be if he learned about the cultivation world but didn't have the fate to cultivate? She could only leave him in the secular world, but it would be difficult to continue their relationship. After thinking for a while, Mo Chenga sighed and threw this problem to the back of her mind. Since it wasn't suitable, it was better not to. In any case, Qin Shi was in closed-door meditation and wouldn't come out for at least 10 or 20 years. After returning to Linhai, Mo Yaoqing continued to cultivate. Although the celestial pole was smaller than Yunzhong, there were so many cultivators in Kunwu that it was no less prosperous than Yunzhong. In such an environment, she lived in seclusion in Linhai without enemies and smoothly advanced to the middle stage of the nascent soul realm. During this period, she also returned to Yunzhong. Relying on her many magic weapons and powerful strength, she wanted to take revenge, but she found that the Grand Supreme Elder who forced her in the past had already passed away. When she learned this news, Mo Yaoqing was stunned for a long time. In the end, she sighed and let go of her hatred. It wasn't until now that she saw through it. No matter what kind of hatred, it couldn't overcome time. Nascent soul cultivators had a lifespan of more than 1,000 years, but so what? One day they would fall and pass away. At that time they would be nothing more than a pile of dirt. After returning to the celestial pole, Mo Yaoqing concentrated on cultivating, but she couldn't make a realm breakthrough again. The sequelae of having her cultivation abolished were very serious. She couldn't overcome that hurdle and wasted hundreds of years in the middle stage of the nascent soul realm. In the end, she couldn't advance to the late stage and finally passed away in the celestial pole. Before passing away, Mo Yaoqing recorded her life and looked back on her life. She fought against fate all her life until the end without any regrets. Mo Chenga put down the jade slip and sat for a long time. Then she exhaled and looked up at the sky. A day had passed and the sky was full of rosy clouds. Soon night would fall, but so what? There were still beautiful stars in the sky and dawn to look forward to. She smiled, put away Mo Yaoqing's jade slip and sat cross-legged in meditation. Although she didn't have Mo Yaoqing's astonishing wisdom, she had luck that she didn't have. She met a master who treated her sincerely and had a lover who was in love with her. Although she also lost something, she gained more. As soon as she entered meditation, her state of mind easily entered a peaceful and empty state. The world seemed to merge into one, becoming ethereal and tranquil. The origin inside her body began to operate. The 5 elements generated each other, yin and yang circulated, growing and multiplying endlessly. Mo Chenga felt that she had entered a very mysterious state. She had never experienced this state before. She felt that her whole body had melted into it, and gradually she didn't have herself anymore. The wind was blowing, she could smell the fragrance of flowers and plants, and she could hear the sound of waves. She seemed to have fallen asleep and woke up again. When she opened her eyes again, it was still night. Mo Chenga didn't know how long she had been cultivating, but she felt refreshed and full of energy. She operated her spiritual aura and felt that there was something unusual in her dantian, as if it was ready to move. She felt that she really wanted to continue cultivating, to let the spiritual aura operate, to absorb spiritual aura from the outside, and to let it flow through her meridians to her dantian. Her cultivation level was now at the peak of the early stage of the core formation realm. She had stopped absorbing spiritual aura for some time, and during this period of time she only cultivated in meditation. Could it be that her body wanted to advance? Thinking of this, she felt happy. She was only a dozen years away from successfully forming her gold core, so she didn't expect to advance so soon. She was talented and didn't lack medicinal pills, so her cultivation level increased quickly. However, because of this, the cultivation of her state of mind would be delayed. She often had to stay at the peak of a certain stage for a while before she could make a breakthrough. Just like when she was building her foundation, she deliberately suppressed her cultivation speed for a long time to let her state of mind keep up with her cultivation level. She didn't expect that this time she could advance so quickly. In just a dozen years she could already advance. Thinking about it carefully, perhaps it had something to do with her reading Mo Yaoqing's life records? Mo Yaoqing remembered everything in detail. During that half a day she followed Mo Yaoqing in the Jade slip, experiencing happiness, sadness and anger. It was almost equivalent to experiencing Mo Yaoqing's life. During this process she experienced a lot and also comprehended a lot. Perhaps it was because of this that her state of mind advanced by leaps and bounds, giving her the impulse to advance. Logically speaking, if she wanted to advance she should enter the virtual sky world. But for some reason she suddenly wanted to sit here and feel everything Mo Yaoqing had experienced. She did as she said. Mo Chenga laid a simple defensive spirit gathering formation around her, took out several kinds of medicinal pills, sat cross-legged, and began to enter closed-door meditation on the spot. Advancing to a small realm like this was much easier than advancing to the foundation building and core formation realms. Moreover, she was in the depths of the uninhabited Eastern Sea, so Mo Chenga only took a clear sky pill and a constitution-enhancing pill, then closed her eyes and began to absorb spiritual aura. The sun rose and the moon set. The tides rose and fell. Amidst the sound of the waves, time passed day by day. Listening to the rise and fall of the waves, Mo Chenga felt as if she had returned to 5,000 years ago, to the era where that proud and determined woman lived. Nothing was eternal, only time. Mortals would grow old and die, and cultivators would advance and fall. With the passage of time, even the most amazing genius would eventually be submerged in time. They would be covered by the desolate smoke creepers and disappear without a trace. Unless one cultivated to become a true immortal and jumped out of samsara. Only then could one grasp time, grasp eternity, become one with heaven and earth, and never be annihilated. *****. 4 months later, Mo Chenga opened her eyes. She looked down at herself. Nothing had changed, but the abundance of spiritual aura in her body was far more abundant than before she entered closed-door meditation. In the past 4 months she had successfully advanced to the middle stage of the core formation realm. Thinking of this, she smiled slightly. Although she didn't advance to the core formation realm earlier than Qin Shi, she advanced to the middle stage of the core formation realm at a younger age than him. She remembered Qin Shi said he went to Demonic Mountain not long after he advanced to the middle stage of the core formation realm. At that time he was already 116 years old. It wasn't that she wanted to compete with Qin Shi, but the gap between their cultivation levels was too big. She needed to catch up to him as soon as possible so they could advance side by side. Thinking of Qin Shi, Mo Chenga's thoughts drifted far away. It had been half a year since she left Xianqing school. After being separated for half a year, she really missed him a bit. She didn't know how he was now. If he knew she advanced to the middle stage of the core formation realm, he would definitely be very happy, right? Maybe. I should go back. She muttered to herself. Although Qin Shi would still be in closed-door meditation when she went back, she could still see him occasionally. After thinking for a while, she shook her head again. This wouldn't do. How many closed-door meditation did a cultivator have to go through in their 1,000+ years of life? It was only half a year. If she kept thinking about him, how could she concentrate on her closed-door meditation? He could do it, so she should also do it. But what should she do next? She found Mo Yaoqing's Immortal's Cave and achieved her goal. If she followed her original plan, she should carefully comprehend the cultivation experience Mo Yaoqing left behind. Right, this was the Eastern Sea. Maybe she could comprehend here while hunting some sea beasts? If she could get some beast cores that Kunwa didn't have, they might be useful in the future. Moreover, she could also train her ability in fights of magical powers. Thinking up to this point, Mo Tienga clapped her hands. That's settled then. Chapter 335. The location of the Immortal's Cave Mo Yaoqing chose was in the depths of the Eastern Sea. Most of the sea beasts that appeared here were in the 5th or 6th rank, and occasionally there were 7th rank beasts. The 5th and 6th ranks were equivalent to the early and middle stage of the core formation realm for human cultivators, while the 7th rank was equivalent to the late stage of the core formation realm, which was just right for Mo Tienga. Of course, this was the depths of the Eastern Sea. Fighting sea beasts on the sea might be more difficult than on land, but human cultivators were stronger than demon beasts in fights of magical powers, even if they lived in the sea. As long as they didn't run into a group of sea beasts, Mo Tienga was confident she could handle them. Even if she couldn't defeat them, she could still escape. With that in mind, Mo Tienga started to make some preparations. For example, what if they were besieged? Moreover, even though she hadn't seen any sea beasts that were above the 7th rank, there might be 8th rank sea beasts that would appear. She couldn't just wait until she encountered one before making her preparations. According to reason, Mo Yaoqing's valley was the best place to hide. With such powerful restrictions, presumably, even 8th rank sea beasts wouldn't be able to rush in. If she couldn't enter the virtual sky world in time, she could just rush inside and stop the sea beasts outside. However, as soon as she came out of the cultivation room, the restriction was immediately restored. Logically speaking, the 7 extremes formation should also be restored. If she wanted to go in again, she would have to break the formation. For this reason, Mo Tienga had to spend some effort. At first, he wanted to try to open another path in the valley, but he found that the restrictions set by Mo Yaoqing were too powerful. Even if he was inside, it was very difficult to break them. Later, she wanted to modify the 7 ultimate formation. However, as soon as she entered the 7 ultimate formation, she found that she could come and go freely. She was incomparably astonished. The formation had obviously been restored, but the spiritual aura inside was still chaotic, just like when she had first arrived. Why didn't it attack her at all when she entered? In the end, she tried again and found that the 7 extremes formation wouldn't attack her at all since she had the 8 trigrams of Tai Chi in her hand. Upon discovering this, Mo Tienga was overjoyed. In that case, she didn't need to open any restrictions or break the 7 extremes formation. A mere Tai Chi 8 diagrams was already so powerful, so how powerful would Mo Yaoqing's natal magic weapon, the soul-frightening bell, be? Mo Tienga couldn't help but be fascinated. Unfortunately, that was Mo Yaoqing's natal magic weapon. She'd already passed away, so that magic weapon should have been destroyed. However, her own natal magic treasure was not bad either. The heaven and earth fan in her hand was originally conceived by Mo Yaoqing. In Mo Yaoqing's notes, she spoke highly of this treasure. Unfortunately, the materials needed were too difficult to find, so she couldn't make it. Mo Tienga, on the other hand, obtained the bone of a divine dragon from the distant past era by chance. Once Mo Tienga finished arranging her escape route, she stepped on the cloud and flew around the island several times. The spirit veins on this island were ordinary, and they were also sealed by Mo Yaoqing with restrictions, so there was only a very thin spiritual aura left. Because of that, only ordinary sea beasts would swim nearby on ordinary days. Demonic beasts were rarely seen. It was only after Mo Tienga ran a little further away that she finally found sea beasts in the 5th rank and above. Upon discovering sea beasts, Mo Tienga didn't hold back at all. As long as the sea beasts were lower than the 6th rank and had 2 or less, she would use her heaven and earth fan and flying sword to directly take their lives and seize their beast cores. Sea beasts below rank 6 were no match for her. The reason why demonic beasts were so tyrannical was because of their physical bodies. Although human cultivators' physical bodies were much weaker than demonic beasts, they possessed intelligence. With their powerful refining techniques, they created magical treasures that were much stronger than demonic beasts' physical bodies. The illusory formation carried by the heaven and earth fan was precisely the nemesis of demonic beasts. They had low intelligence and couldn't distinguish between real and fake illusory formations. Under the power of the heaven and earth fan, they foolishly bumped into it and became turtles in a jar. The more Mo Chenga killed, the more proficient she became. She gradually understood the various uses of the heaven and earth fan and became handy. 2 months passed quickly. During this time, she hunted 1 sea beast a day on average and had accumulated 50 to 60 beast cores. However, gradually she couldn't find any sea beasts. In the past few days she flew very far away from the island, but she still couldn't find any traces of sea beasts. It couldn't be that she killed all the sea beasts in the vicinity, right? Mo Chenga was puzzled. The sea was much wider than the land, so how could there only be so many sea beasts? She forgot that the sea beasts she killed were all high-rank sea beasts. Even if the sea was vast, it was impossible for there to be endless high-rank sea beasts for her to kill in the nearby waters. However, Mo Chenga was somewhat addicted to killing. In order to find sea beasts, she ran farther and farther away. Stepping on the cloud-treading boots, Mo Chenga stared at the calm sea. Suddenly she saw a splash. Her sharp eyes found a cyan tail, and her divine sense suddenly strengthened. Sure enough, a sea beast was diving to the sea at an extremely fast speed. Judging from the spiritual aura emitted from its whole body, it should be a 5th-rank demonic beast. A flying sword immediately appeared in her hand. With a flick of her sleeve, the flying sword pierced downwards at lightning speed, bringing with it a surge of spiritual aura. It rushed to the surface of the sea and pierced the green-scaled tail. Roar! With a dull roar, the sea beast suddenly jumped out of the sea, swinging its tail and gliding, trying to shake off the flying sword. Sea dragon? Mo Chenga was a little surprised to see the appearance of this sea beast. Of course, sea dragons weren't real dragons, they were just a kind of sea race that was similar to dragons. They were much shorter than dragons, had short wings, and were more suitable for swimming in the water. They had no horns and sharp teeth. Their bodies were covered with cyan scales, which looked very similar to dragons. Although they weren't real dragons, sea dragons could be regarded as very useful sea beasts. According to ancient records, sea dragons' skin and bones were very tough and good materials for refining tools. However, sea dragons were very rare among sea beasts. She had been busy here for more than 2 months, but she had only seen 1 sea dragon, and it had escaped. Since there was a sea dragon in front of her, and it was only in the 5th rank, she certainly couldn't let it go. Mo Chenga unfolded the heaven and earth fan, rushed down and spread the fan. Layers of mountains and rivers pressed down on the sea dragon. The sea dragon's tail was still nailed to her flying sword, so it couldn't dodge. It was immediately covered tightly. Seeing this, Mo Chenga shook her arm, took back her flying sword, and was about to stab down and kill the sea dragon. At this time, there was a sudden fluctuation at the bottom of the sea, and a powerful spiritual aura came up from the bottom. At the same time, the surrounding sea surged and the wind and waves were strong. Mo Chenga furrowed her brows and looked around. Could it be that some kind of powerful sea beast had appeared? The spiritual aura fluctuation became clearer and clearer. Mo Chenga was sure that it was a 7th-rank sea beast. Although it was a little difficult to fight against a 7th-rank sea beast, it wasn't impossible. She thought for a moment and decided to kill the sea dragon first, then fight against the 7th-rank sea beast. But just as she was about to throw the flying sword in her hand, a voice came to her mind. Stop! Mo Chenga was shocked. It was a voice transmission through divine sense. This sea beast can actually understand human language? Waves as high as several dozen feet were set off on the surface of the sea. Mo Chenga had no choice but to fly higher to avoid the waves. At this time, the mosasaurus that she had trapped began to roar and twist excitedly. Then a sea beast broke out of the water. It was also a sea dragon, but it was much larger than the 5th-rank sea dragon she trapped. Its whole body was covered with blue scales, glowing with a faint golden light, and its slender eyes were staring at Mo Chenga deeply. At this moment, Mo Chenga felt that this pair of eyes contained endless vicissitudes and wisdom. 7th-rank sea beasts should have very low intelligence. Only when they reached the 8th rank could their intelligence be comparable to that of humans. Human. Looking at this pair of eyes, Mo Chenga heard the voice in her mind again. Don't hurt my children. Looking at this sea dragon, Mo Chenga narrowed her eyes slightly. This was the first time she had talked to a demonic beast. Who are you? She asked tentatively. The sea dragon floated in the air, gently flicked its tail, and communicated with her again through divine sense. I'm the ancestor of the sea dragons in this area. Oh. Emochenga nodded. You can understand human language? The sea dragon looked at her and opened its mouth. I've lived for nearly 10,000 years. In my early years, I was the spiritual beast of a powerful cultivator, so I also understand human language. A cultivator? The sea dragon shook its head and looked like it was nodding. Yes, this cultivator has died. After his death, the spiritual beast contract expired and I was free. I've lived here for thousands of years. Hearing this, Emochenga narrowed her eyes. Thousands of years, a powerful cultivator and a spiritual beast. Could it be Emo Yaoqing's spiritual beast? But she didn't ask immediately. Instead she asked, You're just a 7th-rank demonic beast. How can you live for so long? The sea dragon said, Our sea dragon clan has the bloodline of the primordial divine dragon, so we're different from these low-rank demonic beasts. This sentence was full of pride. Obviously it was very proud of its bloodline. The lifespan of demonic beasts is different from you humans. Besides, the lifespan of us sea dragons is far longer than that of ordinary demonic beasts. It's very common for us to live for tens of thousands of years at most. I see. The sea dragon nodded and looked at the little sea dragon, who was still trapped in her heaven and earth fan. Human, you've been here for several months. In these months, you've killed most of the high-ranked demonic beasts in this area and almost killed a member of our sea dragon clan. If you go on like this, all the high-ranked demonic beasts in this area will be killed by you. At that time you'll attract a catastrophe. What catastrophe? Emochenga asked. The relationship between humans and demonic beasts was one of killing and the other being killed, so she was not bound by morality and didn't feel that she had done anything wrong. The sea dragon said, Our sea clan still has a group of 7th-rank sea beasts that haven't been dispatched. Your behavior has angered us. If you go on like this, we'll besiege and kill you. Emochenga smiled and said, If you can kill me, I won't have anything to say. The sea dragon blinked and anger appeared in its eyes. Don't go too far. Although we demonic beasts are not as good as you humans in fights of magical power, you're only equivalent to a 6th-rank demonic beast. If a dozen 7th-rank demonic beasts besieged you, are you sure you can escape? Emochenga paused, slowly put away her smile and glanced at the sea dragon. Then what do you want? You're not just here to warn me, are you? Warning? Sort of, said the sea dragon. But I want to reach a consensus with you. What consensus? The sea dragon looked at the little sea dragon below and said, Let it go. From now on, don't kill any sea beast here. Emochenga said calmly, Then what can I get? If you don't kill any more, then we 7th-rank sea beasts won't besiege you. In addition, I'll give you a secret as repayment. A secret? Emochenga thought for a moment and smiled again. If you're strong enough, are you afraid that I'll continue to kill? Even in exchange for a secret? Hearing her words, the sea dragon's eyes were filled with anger, and it shouted in a deep voice, Human! The reason why we don't want to fight with you is that you're very strong. Even if we can besiege and kill you, demonic beasts will be sacrificed. We, the Sea Clan, have lived here peacefully for many years. We don't want to get involved in the killing, not because we're afraid of you. Emochenga didn't speak. She knew that the sea dragon was right. Besieged by a dozen 7th-rank sea beasts, even if she could escape, it would be very dangerous. Besides, she had already taken advantage of them. If she still didn't want to stop, she would be asking for a mile after taking an inch. But although she thought so, she couldn't show weakness in words. She smiled slightly and looked into the sea dragon's eyes without fear. Well, I admit you're right. I don't want to fight with a dozen 7th-rank sea beasts. But I'd like to hear your secret and see if it's worth it for me to stop. That you're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.